It's time to expose the modern porn industry and the fact that it's likely by design that so many children are accessing this content around the world at younger and younger ages. And so I think that it's part of a larger mind control operation to not only degrade the feminine as well as the men, because we have a variety of stereotypes and racial programs that are at play in modern pornography. And I'm going to aim to expose some of that. Um, it seems to be preparing people for a world in which people are trafficked and pushed into sexual slavery. Uh, in the future, it's happening now in the present, and there are people concerned about that. But I've been warning for years personally about our society collapsing and a large amount of trafficking taking place of women. And it seems that modern day programming, modern day pornography, seems to be programming people towards that reality, either to carry out certain things or to be basically complicit, to not realize that a lot of the forms of sexuality are serving the dark side. So I'm not condemning sexuality or all forms of sexuality or experimentation, but many of the themes in modern day pornography are absolutely violent, increasingly violent, and there's certain plots and themes. And I'm just going to briefly mention some of this. Then I'm going to mention other things, and maybe in the future come back and talk more about it because it's a very lengthy topic, and there's some perspectives that I have on this that I haven't heard from others. But others so far, and there's been a large amount of them that have shared their story, ex-porn stars that have shared their story of violence on the porn sets, and I'll describe some of that. But basically, the themes here that you don't necessarily hear from some of these other articles is that women are basically being trafficked in these themes, in these plots. And it appears that they're promoting racial violence, like a bunch of black men simulating the rape of a white woman. There's a lot of this content. There's also a lot of animated content. The animated content also features a lot of bizarre sexuality that features a predominantly large amount of content that features alien and or giant or octopus, other forms of alien creatures, different types of alien creatures or non-human creatures having sex with white women. And again, for years, I have speculated about what is the real alien agenda, even with their space programs and discussions of off-world bases and colonizing Mars. And I've asked for years, what is the real agenda of these individuals that are preparing us for this reality? And of course, we have all the movies that have been programming us for the off-world reality. And so just throwing that in there, I've suspected that there is an alien agenda behind a lot of this content. But that's not the only thing. There is a lot of this content that for years has portrayed men in uniform, often white men in uniform, abusing Latino women. And so there's articles about this. And there's some of the stories of some of the actresses that were that made the mistake of answering certain ads in the paper, in which they sought to recruit porn actresses. And in many cases, they're doing highly violent things that they did not agree to, and they're not being paid very much for that content. And of course, they're humiliated forever as that content is immortalized on the internet. And so the trauma that they went through is relived. And that trauma includes situations in which they're told, you know, you can't stop now or you won't get paid. So how is that not like a situation in which someone is being raped? So there are these genres out there and websites out there that portray men in uniform, law enforcement, border patrol, and military. And this stuff has been happening for multiple decades. And so they're engaged in these various types of sexual oppression to these women. And of course, it's become increasingly graphic in recent years where, of course, you compare today's pornography with pornography of the 1970s and 1980s. And there were hardcore versions of it then, but it wasn't as extreme as it is today. There's so many different points that can be made because, of course, there's going to be an argument that sexuality is not evil per se, And there's a lot of religious control over people, and this is the era of sexual liberation. And I have lots of responses to that, but I would say that we're not fully sexually liberated. If we were, there would be depictions, right, of sexuality amongst humans that is more romantic. And some could say that people shouldn't even be watching that, and I can understand that, how that might not be healthy either. But there isn't a lot of that healthy content out there, or anything that looks romantic or spiritual. It's like insane shit. And it's marketed towards children. And there's so many ways in which the big tech websites, I'm not saying anything people don't already know, but see, I felt this way for years, and we're living in the age of certain things being revealed. Even though the corruption hasn't been removed yet, we're becoming more aware of the problem. Doesn't mean that we're going to get out of this situation because we're becoming aware of the problem, but we're at least in the initial stages of realizing that something is wrong here. And the things that we think are normal are not really normal. And so I've seen how, for years, certain websites have been promoted by the mainstream media through news reporting. So that would be Pornhub, and that would be another group, another website called Kink, which has been written about in a PBS article, or an NPR article, rather, in which it was being normalized, I guess, for the feminist left. The idea of sexual liberation. And so, look, I can understand if a female, and I have, again, more to talk about that with regards to why we even have certain types of sexual fetishes or kinks in the modern day society, and where this stuff comes from to begin with, because it's in our programming, because we're in a fallen world. And so even though I talk about spiritual warfare from a non-religious perspective, there are many parallels in what I'm saying with what others are saying that are members of other religions, be they Muslims or Christians or Judaism or other. Okay, there's a lot of parallels in what we're saying, and there does appear to be a demonic element to why this is taking place, a soul trapping element to why we're being brainwashed, why the planet is being brainwashed in such a degree. And so, rewinding just a little bit, there are different types of programs that are put out there in adult content. As I was just saying, there is the authority program. And so in this situation, to expand upon that, there are situations in which women are in bondage or are in prison scenes. And what I want to say here is there's certain things that people are going to want to experiment with regards to their fantasies. But on these websites, there might be like somewhat less intense videos, but next to that, there might be something else that's just over the top and unacceptable. Just totally insane. And I don't even want to mention some of the keywords, but it's hyper violent, beyond just getting off sexually, but attempting to basically induce damage, and inflicting some sort of extreme harm, showing some sort of extreme psychopathic behavior. Not normal, not healthy sexual activity. I can understand for some people, like, they enjoy being rough, and it's part of like human sexuality for women to be slightly submissive and women to be men to be slightly dominant. And that's one thing. Like I said, healthy experimentation. And it's another when we're talking about the stuff that's depicted in these on these websites that has included depictions of inducing death through strangulation. So, like, how has that even been allowed to be legal in the United States of America? And in the society, there's been a great projection onto other societies, in particular Islamic and Middle Eastern, portraying them as the rapists because of the actions of some refugees, when in the Islamic religion, pornography is forbidden and other forms of sexual immorality are forbidden. And so while I'm not religious, like, the reality is this culture in the fucking West, the culture that we are in, assuming that the people listening are in the West, is absolutely perverse. And I've seen elements in my life being exposed to pornography as a young child all throughout my life. And ultimately, like, even though there's a part of us that might be attracted to it, ultimately has always suspected it of being evil and not being healthy. And so at this time, a time in which I'm seeking to expand my consciousness further than it's been in the past, I'm talking about all kinds of different issues as I seek to evolve. And so if we're aware that there's something that we need to warn society about, and we feel we have that truth within our heart, we should seek to go out and warn that society so that it can protect itself from the evils that are out there and from evil people that are out there. So I listened to a few videos from a few ex-porn stars, and they fill in the blanks as to the things that go on at the porn scenes that people don't see in the videos. And so there's a certain amount of men and women that just don't care about the things that happen to other women and children. And I've experienced this for years because I've been speaking out against the violence towards women and the various types of programming for years, and people haven't taken my information seriously. But yet this topic and dozens of other topics and things that I've warned about have come to proven to be very relevant and true. I predicted, like on social media over 10 years ago, that there would be a wave of suicides after 2020, and there is. I said years ago there would be an increase in mass shootings and violence in the path to war, in particular war with China, in the road to in the march to 2025 and beyond. And we see plans for this. And while there may not be a war necessarily in the next few years, we're still in danger of one being kicked off. Here at the moment of speaking, North Korea is joining forces, or has joined forces with North Korea, with China and Russia. The Russian delegation sending representatives to North Korea as it fires off another missile threatening the West, as we are on the verge of war with that. Like, literally, people need to think this through. It's not an accident that society has degenerated sexually at this point in time, when we are close to the brink of collapse, or a situation in which there is no food and there is no water. And in situations like that, in war-torn zones, bad things happen to women that are not protected, that do not have protectors. And so for years, I've been talking about this programming in society to divide man and woman, and to demonize the good male or the sacred masculine, and to promote the dark masculine and the dark feminine. And the other thing that I've connected with this is, so not only have women been abused by the porn industry, and that's being exposed now in a massive way in which it wasn't in the past, but much more today. We also have the exposure of an industry that has abused many men that have played the role of the warrior, and that is professional wrestling. Those people that have involved themselves in certain organizations and certain corporations. Obviously, we're talking about the WWE, which is basically has dominated professional wrestling and has gobbled up multiple territories and is the subject of many controversies, include the controversial deaths of many wrestlers. There's many conspiracies and theories within that, but you can fill in the blank for your own. There's people that have not questioned the official story with regards to certain deaths in the wrestling industry. There's also a large number of deaths in the porn industry, women that have killed themselves. And so we have this pattern here with men being abused in the wrestling industry by being a part of something that wants to destroy them too, through their body. So by being body slammed night after night after night. These documentaries coming out showing 350 days. What's that? That is to say they are on the road and performing in the ring 350 days out of the year, that they have no time to recover from their injuries. And so while wrestling is staged, wrestling is real in the sense that there are real injuries. And so they're pressured to take steroids. There's injuries from that. They end up taking painkillers and doing drugs on the road, and there's injuries from that. And of course, the spiritual attacks that come from being a drug addict and getting other people into drugs. And I've listened to the story of Billy Jack Haynes for years. I've met him once in the late 90s. He has an interesting story. So do many others. Jake the Snake, the Ultimate Warrior, against suspicion about his death and what's that is all about. I've speculated also in the past about certain deaths with regards to certain wrestlers, and put out certain videos that highlighted clips of the WWE years ago promoting violence against women. Okay, so even back then in 2009, I'm showing the parallel between that and what's happening in society, an increase in violence towards women being promoted by the mainstream. Even though, right, there's so much programming about this society saving women around the world. Some people call it the white savior complex, which is also predominant in the Sound of Freedom movement or the Sound of Freedom movie. And so while we need to expose human trafficking, this is not just something that is coming from foreigners or an outside threat or something that foreigners are bringing. There's a heavy emphasis from right-wingers today that everything threatening to women and their society has to do with foreigners. When there is a very high amount of incest and sexual abuse at the family level, within families in the United States, much of it underreported. And so we see this widespread use of pornography in our society and how it's motivated people to either engage in some of that activity or abuse or to be so numb to it because there's so much of an abundance of it that it's been so normalized that they're not really alarmed by the increase in sexual assault in our society. So I've had experiences where I've tried to warn women in the past about what I think is coming in the future and have been insulted in some cases. I shared with one woman that I met randomly at the bar about how I felt that there was an agenda after the collapse for human to be trafficked if we're ruled by China or something to that effect, ultimately suspecting that there could be a Chinese cartel connection. And I'll tell you right now, there is a Chinese cartel connection with the poisoning of America with fentanyl and other drugs. And so certain things do seem to be coming true, and there's been a lot of data stolen from the American people. Why is that? And so there's a lot of data from a lot of females that are putting out their information out there and their Instagram photos and their Facebook photos. And so there's many ways in which women could be targeted due to their online activities and the breaches of privacy. And so because I do give a shit about people and I do feel something bad coming, I have been speaking out about it and warning people. And, people haven't been very receptive to the things that I have warned them about. And so it's frustrating. But at this point, I'm going to talk about my thoughts on the matter and share them in some way with people online that may be on the level, that can see this, that can see that there is an agenda behind this. Like when you look on Google, like I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. You can look up certain phrases or sexual phrases, and unless the content filter is on, all types of crap's going to come up. And so like a 5-year-old could be typing in certain things and could literally just receive a link or a text from one of their friends who has a cell phone. And again, all these kids have cell phones where many of us are a little bit older didn't have cell phones or internet access when we were coming up. And so they're being desensitized to this hardcore crap, and there are effects of that trauma on society. So what type of parents are they going to be in the future if they've been desensitized from a really young age to sexual violence? And again, even if people have certain desires, there are things that are featured on these websites that are beyond the norm, where there seems to be algorithmic manipulation. And so, like in the regular world on social media and the mainstream media, I've said in many, many ways that there's different types of racist programs that are out there towards different racial groups, just to maintain the unrest. Well, in adult entertainment, also known as porn, there's different types of oppression. So, there might be white men simulating a rape of a black woman and humiliating her in various ways that I won't describe, or a Latino, or in the next case, which I haven't mentioned yet, right? Muslim and Arabic. These are popular tags or keywords. And without a doubt, there is an attempt to maybe even contaminate the Islamic world as well as they get online. And they have, I think there are certain consequences maybe for viewing pornography and elements of the Islamic world, but they maybe do it anyways. And so it almost seems like entrapment. It could be illegal in some ways, but you can access it. It's believed to be a sin, okay, according to the religion of Islam. It's also a sin in Christianity. So there's many out there that say there's a demonic tie to it. So regardless of your denomination, there are many belief systems out there that say that, well, sex is natural and is a part of procreation, like, the heavy lust and using our eyes to gaze upon outside of ourselves, as Jesus apparently is alleged to have said. I don't have his exact quote. I apologize, but it has to do with basically describing that lust, looking through the eyes, is committing a form of adultery, being in that fantasy land. And like literally this whole world, this whole crazy electronic matrix is one big giant fucking, excuse my language, fantasy land. From cradle to grave, just fantasy of this, fantasy of that. So there's a few websites, there's a few resources. Let me move this forward, because there's so many different dots here and I can't cover them all at once. And there's many things that are on my mind, but I'm not going to get to them all. YouTube, when I've looked up like information on this topic exposing the porn industry, there are certain channels that suggest that that's what it is in the title, and there's actually nudity in the actual video. And so AI is not removing certain sexual content from YouTube. And some people have seen pretty extreme things on YouTube. Some people have even made allegations of people being trafficked on YouTube. And that's something that was said by Tracy Twyman before her alleged suicide in 2019. Back to YouTube. There is a documentary that has recently been removed from YouTube that a group put out there that is basically exposing the rise in violent pornography in the U.S. and things that happen on the porn scene, and perhaps other things. And it's called, let's see if I can recall this. Barely Legal is in the title. Let's see. Exodus City put out the documentary. And so the documentary has been put out for about a year. They have other documentaries where they're exposing pornography and talking to ex-porn stars. And so they're exposing certain websites in particular. And of course, like there's one organization called Mind Geeks, which owns Pornhub, which basically owns all these other subsidiary porn websites. And so they might look slightly different, but they all have the same psychopathic theme to them. Again, no middle of the road, no spiritual sex, again, and constantly promoting various types of interracial sex, but mostly white on black or black on white or white on Muslim or something like that. A lot of white dominant sex. And again, there's a big like denial. There's a rise in white supremacy in our society. There's a rise in all different types of racism in our society. And that's one of them. It's not the only one. And in my other recordings, I expose other aspects of the mind control taking place and encourage people to exit it and realize that they're being programmed to identify with a tribe and then see others that are different than them as the enemy. And see, that's part of this. You see, I've often seen it said to people in these blogs trying to help people quit pornography, say, imagine that that's your sister or your mother on that film set being degraded. Will you still consume that content? And see, many people would not if they look at it that way. So they're not looking at that woman as like their sister or their friend. That's someone to degrade. And so if someone is a different ethnicity or someone is a different race and there's racial tensions being amplified, and there could be an increase in certain types of hate crimes or sexual attacks, or there's certainly things that happen in the war zone. When we look at the Middle East and the occupation of Afghanistan and Iraq, a certain amount of those women have been sexually assaulted or violated. And that's another lengthy discussion. See, they talk about Islamic rape, but they only talk about like foreigners being a threat to white women or things like that. They don't talk about what has been done to those people and how many innocent people have been accused of terrorism or supporting terrorism that have been taken away. And, that is a pretty sick thing that has been happening for a long time. But it's not limited to our society. We can look at another various situation that took place in the last century. And there's many books about it, and it is called, and see, like, I don't hate Japanese people. I like many elements of the Japanese culture, but there are some twisted things with regards to the Japanese culture, with regards to pornography. And we have this history called the rape of Nanking. And it was a situation in World War II in which many Chinese women, and I believe the region was Nanking, were raped for a extended period of time, pretty violent, for a period of weeks or months. And so this is highly destructive. This is messed up. We also see, even though right, we have the horrors of Nazi Germany and what the Nazis did to the Jews and others in Europe, right? We understand that. At least some of us do. Many do not. What happened to the Nazis was that when Berlin fell, many of the German women were raped by Soviet soldiers. And there's documentaries about this. And so, this goes into other theories that I have about karma, and it gets pretty spiritual, and it might take us outside of the scope of the conversation of exposing pornography. But I'm telling you now that when you have a society that is programmed to commit genocide or harm, there is a karmic repercussion for that upon that society. Okay, almost like a curse that appears when people engage in certain types of harm: rape, sexual violence, murder, genocide. It's all related, torture. And so we have this situation that happened to the German women after the actions of the Nazis. And that doesn't make it right, but that is unfortunately what happens in war-torn situations when countries are invaded. And there's a sense of revenge in the mindset of the soldiers or society, that society, get back at those people. And that subconscious, right, attitude of revenge, think the anger towards the Afghan people for 9/11, even though it may not be what people think. And even according to the official story, there was a Saudi and Pakistani influence. They sent in those hijackers. They weren't even Afghans. But there'll still be a subconscious program, right, within the Western world towards those people that's less empathetic because of that subconscious programming that they did something to the Western world. So therefore, when those people get raped, when they get harmed, when they get murdered, when they get tortured, when they get attacked by drone attacks, their lives don't really matter because there's that sense of retaliation or revenge or anger towards those people because they manufactured that event, in my opinion, and created that trauma in society. They therefore created hate. It resulted in hate. Problem, reaction, solution. And it's happening again right now. And I talk about that in other podcasts, the rise in racism towards Middle Eastern people. I call it the switch programming. And so, again, you don't hear this from some of the critics exposing pornography today, that there is this anti-Muslim, anti-Arabic type of sexual violence that is depicted, right, in these videos that does include simulation of U.S. troops in some videos violating Middle Eastern women. And so there are also stories that we've read. I believe the region was Haditha, Iraq. The girl was 14. They raped her and killed the whole family, made the family watch some bizarre stuff. So people could be motivated to join forces, various forms of authority, be it police, military, or other, yet to even be created, but positions of authority where they're wearing the uniform and they have control over others as a prison guard or some other form of authority, also including border guards or the border patrol. Lots and lots of genres of pornography relating to those themes, and catching illegals and having their way with the illegals. See, this is all insane. And I asked it early in the podcast, how is some of this allowed to be legal? And why would there be no age checks whatsoever? On that note, I wouldn't necessarily trust a system that wanted everybody's ID or credit card information either. I would just recommend that people try to resist pornography in general. And even if they don't consume it, to not be so apathetic, though, to what pornography is doing to the rest of society. In other words, just because you're living your own supposed spiritual Christian lifestyle or New Age lifestyle or off-grid lifestyle or successful businesswoman or businessman lifestyle, and you have a happy life and your kids are safe, at least for now, and hopefully they will be safe. But just because, right, this stuff may not seem to necessarily relate to you directly, at least that you can suspect or be aware of, it does, and it is. Because there are many people out there that are being programmed with rage. So there's also a lot of programming in which black women are, black women are being violated by white men. But what I was going to say is black men are violating white women. And I've said in other ways also that I don't believe that black people are the most suppressed racially. I believe that the people of the Middle East are, through these drone attacks and wars and many, many other things that are taking place. I think that has changed since 9/11. Um, but there is racism towards black people. Yes, I identify that and have talked about that for years. But in recent years, we've seen a rise in only talking about issues that affect black people and not the rest, and not calling out the programming within elements of black culture that could see itself as supreme in its own way, like gods and goddesses. We see a lot of people referring to themselves as god and goddesses on YouTube. And so that superiority complex combined with a sense that white people owe them something, now that there's a certain level of programming in society that at times literally can be seen as anti-white, because it's not really healing the racism, it's responding with more racism of its own. Or there might be articles in society that say things like, is it time to start robbing white people or taking from white people? And I'm saying, like, I think that that is there on purpose, just like some of the violent pornography is there on purpose to brainwash people into harming other people that don't look like them. And so there is a lot of programming that promotes violent sexuality with regards to black men and white women and the reverse, but definitely a great deal of black on white sexual violence. And it's in comic book form and it's in toon form. There's also comic books that do depict a future occupied, destroyed America where there's human trafficking that is being controlled by those that run the world government. Those exist as well. Now think about that. People like literally creating content like this instead of doing good. And I raised the question years ago, why are there more women involved in pornography than there are in the truth movement? But in recent years, there's been more women joining the quote alternative media, or the alt-right, which isn't used as much anymore. It's more or less called the far right. There's way more people on the far right now and in modern pornography, and women promoting white supremacy and promoting pornography and things like this than there are women promoting a true form of spirituality. There's good women out there, and there's a lot of good content from women that I see online, but often they're not promoted. There might be only like a few hundred views on their channel. Quite often I see this case on YouTube where quality information is on a channel with only a few hundred views per video and like 9,000 subscribers when they should have far more. And so even if there are good women out there that are exposing these things, they're not the ones that are promoted necessarily. It's people that are seen as the preferred influencers of this world. And so, for years I've talked about this, and I'm not alone. Other people have mentioned this. There's a certain programming for women and men. And so for women, it's been the programming to be a whore and a slave. And for men, it's to be a different type of slave, a different type of mind slave. And that is like the pro wrestler, pro nationalist, white supremacist, military industrial complex, the trooper, the soldier, the officer, the person that serves the authority figure, the man in uniform, etc., 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 etc. And both the male and female version of that is dark masculine, dark feminine. And they play off of each other. And we often see the dark masculine and dark feminine coming together and working against the other conscious men and women that are not corrupted in society. And so sometimes men and women that are good are isolated in this world, or they come under attack by their peers. And so we can look at this world and we can see it. These conversations are being had all over the internet, but someone could still end up isolated because of their own views on this on the internet, because of algorithmic manipulation. And so when I tried to bring this to people's awareness years ago, nobody listened to me, and it was considered extreme. And now when I look at these other criticisms from these other websites, one of them is antipornography.org, which has a lot of written material. I'm seeing a lot of my concerns being echoed by others, but the main point is not being made, which of course has been made today, that it seems that there is an agenda to program people to act a certain way in the collapse. And the mechanisms already seem to be there on the internet to enable trafficking. And so as people wake up to the fact that there's a lot of child sex trafficking. They need to wake up to the reality of what's going on and what has been allowed by their own government, and not be misled by QAnon type movements that try to project the human trafficking onto foreigners exclusively. Yes, in some cases, foreigners are involved, but ultimately it's our own government that is responsible for allowing certain things to even get as bad as they have gotten to begin with. Like I said, there's a fair amount of human trafficking that may have already been going on with many, many websites, including YouTube. Next point that I'm going to make, okay? There was an article showing that Facebook's Instagram was featuring AI-generated child pornography. Now, how am I to believe that that's an accident? That it's an accident that the AI detection systems do not pick up on that and find that? You can look it up for yourself. Why would that be happening? Why would all this other stuff be happening on YouTube with sexual content flying under the radar without the AI algorithm going, yeah, that's not good? And I'll tell you, it's because that which controls AI may be a negative entity. And so this intersects with, you want to go down that rabbit hole, you start looking up on Google and using certain keywords, you're not going to find a ton of content, and you got to turn your filter switch on first. Otherwise, you'll get pornography websites popping up on your search. But put on the filter and then look up porn and demonic possession. And so you might come across certain stories where people have shared their stories. But I'm telling you, like in the actual cartoons on these websites, it's often promoting a demonic theme or an alien invasion theme, or a giant, Return of the Giant theme, Return of the Nephilim theme, an octopus theme, and also certain websites often associated with Japanese animation that show the female as quite young in a variety of ways. But it's legal. But it's pushing it to the boundary of what is actually legal without it actually being CP. And for years, so much of that has been allowed on the content, allowed on the internet, allowed on certain websites that should have the AI filtering mechanisms in place to prevent that content from being posted to begin with. And there's deeper conspiratorial views on that and how it's allowed and why it's allowed. And so that perspective is there as well. So someone's going to be against the trafficking taking place. Then they need to maybe go all the way and look at the role that the adult industry is playing in human trafficking, in violence against women, in disrupting normal, healthy relationships. In another video, I'm going to talk about the many topics that I have removed over the years because I was harassed, because it drew in evil people, and it didn't mean that I was saying something that I regretted in that content or in that video or in that podcast. It was that the results were not positive, that I came under spiritual attack, that I was slandered. And all I was trying to do is help men and women break free from their programming. And so in that content, that was inappropriately tagged with MTGOW, or men going their own way without knowing any better. I didn't know about the racism and misogyny in that movement. I was coming in as a mixed race human, not a misogynist, wanting to see a liberated man and woman who wanted to criticize modern day relationships and sexuality. And there wasn't really a genre or a hashtag with regular society for me to do that. There was just simply MGTOW, which at that point in 2013, 2014 had not become as extreme as it did later, and associated with the term incel, something that I was not. I was someone that was not an incel, but rather was dissatisfied with just promiscuous behavior and a lack of true love and romance, having been with multiple partners in my life, but never finding true love or a person that loved me, my soul as it is, for the work that I've done on this planet and the information that I've revealed. I have never felt loved or appreciated, not even from my mother, for the person or the man that I am and the people that I'm standing up for. I've only found carnal, promiscuous situations that were solely based in lust. And so that is a place of heartbreak for me. And I'm admitting to you that as a result of not being loved by the women of this world and not being appreciated, I have sought to not have promiscuous situations and to just stick to myself, but I have used elements at times of adult entertainment. And I'm not at present, so now I will speak about it. So I have come to understand the things that are being promoted out there through my own consumption. And so that's why I feel compelled to expose it, because I feel that that is the trap that many people are led into, that because many people have difficulties finding a good partner in a world where there's many STDs and sick people, many people, including many women, but I'm not going to do a big focus on that, but many women are into violent pornography in today's society, which I find to be very alarming. It is something that is just kind of there, that we are socially engineered collectively to gravitate to and even perceive as healthy and liberating, when in fact it's not. If it was liberating and we were evolving, then there would be different forms of sexuality promoted by the internet algorithms, but there's not. It's always the degrading. So why do they promote content that wants us to degrade ourselves and another person? So that includes the person watching it is degrading themselves because they're watching someone else being degraded. So the cycle of abuse and trauma is continuing. And part of them then are traumatized by this. And so they become then desensitized further. And they become even more taken over by the spirit of lust, which many people believe is demonic. And where are the New Agers on this? Silent on this. I've talked in other recordings about how they've been promising the collective shift in consciousness. David Wilcox and others talking about people being in full-on telepathy at this point in time, and all these different things. And we actually have way more demonic interference in our society. But that doesn't mean that we should be afraid. We should rise above anger, lust, fear, revenge, hatred, racism, lower consciousness, ego, self-pity, victimhood consciousness. We need to rise above the illusions of separation, tribalism, and all of these things. The attachment to this world. We need to rise above the fear of death, but yet not run into death. We shouldn't be totally careless or overconfident in this world. Some fears may be there to wake us up and realize, hey, we're getting into a car with the wrong stranger or the wrong person, but we should not be a slave to fear. We need to understand what the fear is trying to tell us. Don't do this. Don't do that. I'll tell you this. There's many ways in which it seems that the dark side wants to reveal itself and intimidate us into silence. I'll be expanding upon this as well. I think a lot of the AI glitches that we're seeing out there is an intimidation program. And I think that I, in my own personal life, in my own awakening, especially this year with the rise of AI and the AI chatbots, which I've criticized, the nefarious agenda that we've seen from Bing, others, we have Google Bard gobbling up all the internet's data, everybody's copyrighted information. This is happening at a time in which I've seen more interference on my physical computer and on websites that I visit. And there was a moment when I was consuming a form of adult content that my computer dimmed from 88% to 66%. And I knew that that was a form of interference. And so there's going to be some cases in which our computer does weird things that are unexplained, that it hasn't done before because of some stupid Windows update or because the computer is breaking down. But there's other cases in which there is a demonic influence. Now, there's a certain perspective that you can get that goes deeper into this. If you type in Sufism and jinn into YouTube, and you'll get a certain content creator that's exposing the jinn in the cell phones, in our computers. And even if you're not Islamic or Christian or spiritual, I would try to be open to what this person is saying. And he's not radicalized. And there's a lot of good content on his channel. And it takes a certain individual at a certain level of intuition and intelligence to be able to be open to another person's spiritual information, even if they're a member of another culture or religion. So I will say that in certain circumstances, there are certain traditions, be they Jewish, Christian, Islamic, Middle Eastern, especially other Arabic or Middle Eastern religions other than Islam, that includes Zoroastrianism, and other things. Like, there is power in a variety of mystical traditions, including some Gnostic interpretations, but not all. There may be some distortions there. with regards to the variety of Gnostic thought or the other teachings of Jesus that are not known by today's mainstream Christians. That would include perspectives on the archons, often called demons by mainstream Orthodox Christians. So I believe that we are destined to arrive at a point to where we have the ability to learn from a variety of people. I don't believe that all the information comes from a single book or a single source. Ultimately, the life experience is our ultimate educator and teacher. And so I've learned a lot of these things from my own experiences. There's a lot of perspectives that I have that were never taught to me. And so when it comes to what I think is going on with the porn industry, these are perspectives that did not come from Alex Jones, David Icke, or other people in the conspiracy theory movement. There may be parallels in what we're saying, but the conclusion that I have arrived, that a lot of this material has been put out there deliberately to prepare people for a collapsed America and to degrade America, and for other reasons, to push us into a more darker society and connect us with darker entities. Those are things that I have arrived to on my own. And I think that now is a time in human history that other people are arriving at some of these conclusions. Although society is very behind in realizing the demonization campaign towards various Middle Eastern or ethnic or Arabic groups, even if they're not Muslim. But I think that it's time for people to be concerned with more than just what they call Islamophobia, and more concerned about racism towards various ethnic groups and migrants. Okay, and there's a lot of people out there that are making false claims that all of this immigration is going to lead to widespread sexual assault of their women. And that is not the complete truth. They are omitting and deleting the reality of sexual oppression that is currently existing within their own culture. And so when you hear these stories, bringing me my next point, sometimes it's 1 hour, sometimes it's a half hour, but there's a variety of ex-porn stars that are verbally discussing what happened to them at these porn studios. And so I'm just going to detail some of that without being super graphic. And again, we're talking about situations in which, and there's certain companies, names that they drop that were behind this, that are very popular, that are promoted by the Google algorithm. And there's situations in which they're told ahead of time to look at the content first and to tell them what they're comfortable with and not comfortable with. And so they go through with certain scenarios, but they take it to a level in which the actors, the male porn actors, are actively trying to break them and fuck their brain up through the sexual experience. Like, to not just have an act, but to actually break them, to cause an actual like rape type experience on the porn set where the woman is pushed to her absolute brink. So that's absolutely demonic. It's one thing for people to simulate, like I said, roughness, and that seemed to be a part of the natural human code, and why there's a high population. There's a lot of that within the DNA itself, and a lot of programming to procreate and to come under cults and religions, and a lot of it is tied together. Yes, in some degree, having a big population is a part of the agenda in some cases. And in some ways, we have been engineered to be a big population, to have a lot of human beings having the modern slavery experience. So I'm just throwing that in. There is the depopulation conspiracy theory agenda. I understand that. But there's also the other agenda that has been unfolding for centuries and centuries. And that's the bigger population growth, because we've seen growth and growth and growth and growth. And we've seen a manipulation of the masses for more than just the last 100 years, or more than just the period in time in which the internet has been online. Okay, the control over various populations in various regions of the earth has been ongoing for a long time. In a separate discussion, we can talk about the history of Afghanistan, right? And how it has been invaded or attacked and occupied by various superpowers. Now we see China moving into position to dominate Afghanistan, where it was previously dominated by Western powers, European powers, the US military, NATO, Australia, the UK, and they have done some horrific war crimes and done some messed up things in Afghanistan. But before that, we have the estimated death toll of 3 million people dead with the Russian occupation of Afghanistan. And before that, we have the British. the British and their attempts to invade Afghanistan, and the British and what they've done to India. And so, yeah, when people talk about conspiracy theories and manipulations, this is really about understanding the true hidden hand, not an anti-Semitic belief system, which I do not subscribe to and reject wholeheartedly, but a true understanding of what the global agenda is and how societies have been manipulated throughout history. And in some cases, we have possessed leaders throughout history that have misled. And this has been ongoing. So these forces of evil that are operating today have been around for some time, is what I'm suggesting. Now, one has to be, if they're going to expose these things and other things, including the corruption within pro wrestling, is they have to be on the spiritual path. Otherwise, they can come under demonic attack. And there's ways in my life in which I could have been on a more pure path, but I've done my best. And so, there's ways in which if you're going to go out and you're going to expose certain things, it's going to get their attention. When I was making videos about the WWE, formerly known as the WF, it attracted their attention and they filed copyright in 2012 on the video in which I was showing them promoting violence against women, showing The Undertaker, Yokozuna, maybe Stone Cold Steve Austin, others basically slapping women, body slamming women in the ring. And at that time, I knew that that program was a deliberate demonic program that was run parallel to the occupations of foreign lands and the things being done to other people, and concurrent to the rise in violent pornography, and concurrent also to the rise of the UFC. And there's also a lot of violent videos where it's showing simulation between men and women wrestling and it becoming a sexual scene in which the man is dominating the woman in some sort of chokehold. Often they're wearing wrestling masks. And so this is the type of stuff that can pull in people that have been already programmed by pro wrestling and or the UFC and or boxing. There's videos in which black men are punching white women in the stomach. And there's a genre around that, okay? So in 2009, I already knew that this was an issue, that this was part of the conspiracy or agenda to manipulate people through adult entertainment and to manipulate people to prepare them for the collapse. And so, I don't know, some words may have been shared with a person that was a friend of mine in the past. She reached out to me in 2008 when she moved to the city of my birth, where I'm from, and she saw an article that I read online, that I wrote online, that was published in the magazine. And she reached out and wanted to hang out. And she introduced herself, and she had said that she was a part of the porn industry. She was someone that was behind the camera, and I was more promiscuous during that time. I would say in the late 2000s and 2011 and parts of 2013. I was seeing different women and had been promiscuous in different ways. I have not in recent years, deliberately, to protect myself from demonic energies and to rise above my own lust. But back then, when I was younger, and circumstances in my life were different, I was seeing a few more people. And I also made a connection with the energy of that time with the rise of the solar cycle. It does increase at least the male libido, at least from my experience, periods in which there's greater solar activity. And so there's periods in which people are going to be more sexually active, years in which there's more female receptivity to basically men trying to get laid and live in that world. A world often without romance. Yeah, and I'll talk more about that in the future. 'Cause it's often a world without romance, where polygamy is promoted, where romance is demonized, and being hypersexual is promoted. And there are people that are reaching a certain awareness of that. So in 2009, she said that she had a friend of hers, and I don't remember her name, but she's a really famous porn actress who is in a lot of violent, rough pornography. And she scheduled, because I was doing online radio at that time, she scheduled an interview between myself and her. And I think that we were going to expose the pornography industry and maybe other things in politics. I think the other person, she was Israeli and wanted to expose the Israeli agenda, or maybe also known as the Zionist agenda. And I say that as an anti-Semitic, not as a non-anti-Semitic person, a person that does not blame all Jews for all the world's problems, but realizing that there is a role that Israel is playing in the agenda, but not by itself, in conjunction with other countries. And so I don't know all of what we were going to get into, but I know those topics were on the table. And for whatever reason, I had a bad feeling about that. I didn't want to necessarily come under sustained attack. Certain things in my life, right, I think have happened in which I did not talk to certain people because that was not the right time for me to talk about that topic or come upon a certain radar. Because once you put out information, and I put out information under my birth name, not a stage name, for years, mind you. Okay, a lot of people that enter the alternative media or YouTube or pornography or pro wrestling, they use stage names or things of that nature. I did not. And so as a result of not doing that, I came into a form of sustained attack and slander as a result of the light that I've been trying to share. And so I'm trying to be a little bit more careful these days. Um, and so I chose to not do that interview. And I also was not, again, if you have not risen above your own demons or have not made that pledge and dedication to the true God of this reality, not to sound religious, but yeah, in some cases we have to ask for deliverance from our lust and repent of our sins and our lustful thoughts in order to overcome them. At that time, I had not overcome that or had been in a state of wanting to overcome that. I was still young. I was 29 and I was experiencing high libido, peak sexual energy. And like I said, experiencing what I believe to be the solar influence when the sun's more active, the energy, women being more receptive, to Craigslist ads. I put out certain ads that women responded to me rather than me responding to their ads. I drew women to me through ads on Craigslist. And I did not explicitly state in those ads that this was to be a purely sexual experience. I described in those ads, in many cases, that I was deeply philosophical and spiritual and aware of certain things happening on the planet and looking for someone to appreciate me for me. But it still ended up primarily, despite that, it never really was about my information or us becoming partners and maybe working together to expand consciousness together. It was almost always in those situations something that led to alcohol and the sexual experience, and never seeing that person again, and then feeling heartbroken as a result of that. And so in my life, there was a sense of heartbreak of none of these women wanting to be a deeper friend, rather just a sexual object by their own volition, because many women do seek out certain types of experimentation and kink behavior. And there have been many times in which certain things have been requested of me to do that I did not do or want to do, things that made me feel uncomfortable. Nor have I done anything to push someone beyond their own limits or their own boundaries. But I haven't been perfect. But I have not felt, right, that deep, positive, spiritual type of sexual experience, which I think a lot of us desire, that is based in a true unity and a love for that individual. I've always desired that, but never really found the person, right, to project that type of love into. And so when you just go from empty sex to empty sex, that can not only drain the person of their aura, especially if they're a person full of light, because people with dark entities could be attracted to talk to us. And really, they're there, knowing it or not, to sabotage us. So there could be targeted spiritual attack when it comes to promiscuous behavior. And I was not thinking this through as a younger person, but I was warned about it. Even my mother told me, be careful who performs fellatio on you, because there could be an energy vampiric thing taking place. And so we're not just talking about what happens to women. And we can even go deeper into what type of energy vampirism is taking place with the domination of women in pornography. But like I said, there is that which happens to the man that goes along with the program. He himself could be playing host to demonic entities, lustful entities, by engaging in certain activities that go in certain directions. And so it's not about someone being an incel. No, I think that's a part of the dark programming to label everybody that. That is not going to program. That is not going to be a part of the program. It is better to live as a monk or be celibate in some cases, than to participate in a program in which demons are being shared and hopping from body to body. And so there's many ways in which there are demonic portals, in which the screen can be a portal. The person to screen activity. Again, this phrase Black Mirror, also the title of a Netflix series that came out years ago that deals with a dystopic reality involving technology and cell phones, the internet, deepfakes. And on the topic of deepfakes, information about this has been coming out for some time, but now it's going to the next level with the hyperdrive of AI into 2023. So with ChatGPT and the rise of the bots, there's also the rise of AI-generated art, and that includes video. Highly produced video that is hard to detect whether it's real or not. And so there are these deepfake programs that are showing women, random women, that basically their photos were gathered from Instagram or social media, Facebook, places like that. And they were placed in a software program on in a digital program. And so a woman with her face, it looks like her, but it's not her. It's a digital program depicting various women being abused sexually in a variety of ways, and sometimes in highly intense ways. And they've done this to celebrities, and they've done this to leftist people on the left, and that could be seen as acceptable to people that are in the left-right paradigm. You know, acceptable to see Greta demonized, Hillary demonized in that way. And so we don't have to be a fan of Greta or Hillary or the left to see that that type of programming is ultimately wrong. It was also mentioned in an article that I read last night that there was a term often used on the right called cuck to describe men on the left, men that are seen as submissive. And they pointed out that it has pornographic roots. So does Donald Trump, not only in his connection to the porn star, which he paid off, but the term cuck used by the right is short for cuckold, which depicts often men having sex with women and men being forced to watch, which is another very bizarre, sick form of pornography, which I would think that many men would not be attracted to. I don't see anything positive about that form of sexuality, that form of brutality. So we're not only brutalizing the female, but the male is brutalized. The husband or the boyfriend or the male partner is brutalized by being forced to watch their female partner violated. And that can traumatize someone. Now, on that note, there's someone that told me in 2017 that that happened to him in real life, that he was forced to watch his girlfriend raped. And while that was sad, and that's horrific, and I have nothing but empathy for a man that has experienced that, this person was also incredibly demonic himself and did some mean shit to me for no reason. That was completely unwarranted. He called me a conspiracy theorist and sent me a nasty email when I didn't want to be around his presence anymore. And he showed himself to be a conspiracy theorist and to be promoting fake information, in particular about the sun. He seemed to be really jealous and angry with me that I had different ideas about the influence of the sun. And he had a different message about the sun and how it was affecting our reality. And he has been promoting his own version of doom porn, fear porn, and promoting himself as some sort of a savior, a person with the knowledge, another false prophet. And so a lot of these people, I think, have been tapped into demonic influences, and I became convinced about this person, that there was a demonic influence with him, and that he had been maybe even using some evil spirits or calling out to them to boost his ratings. Because after that negative experience in which he insulted me, humiliated me, and also told his audience that I was his neighbor when I said, do not tell people that I live in this area because I have stalkers and I want to be left alone. He didn't give a fucking shit about that. And so this person that had been sexually humiliated, or his woman also sexually humiliated his girlfriend, and he also did time in prison, these traumatic experiences made him a meaner person. And not everybody that experiences oppression or hardship or racism or discrimination, not every person becomes an evil person. But this often is the case, where some people that are traumatized become evil people. There's also one article out there that draws a direct link between trauma in white society and white supremacy, as in people becoming white supremacists because of trauma inflicted upon them at some point. And that's a much deeper labyrinth an area of discussion that we can go into, because there's lots of ways in which they project trauma. Again, we talked about the trauma of the 9/11 event. Again, they traumatized the Western world in the holographic projection of it coming from an outside threat, when the powers that be allowed that event to take place in order to launch these wars. You weren't expecting me to go in that direction, but see, all this is connected. All this is connected. And so that's why this pornographic company known as the WWE, which is not necessarily showing penetration, but they're showing sexual violence against women, women being oppressed. And pro wrestling has played a role in promoting a violent mindset along with the military industrial complex, promoting the wars overseas, promoting the military, using certain language in its TV shows. Raw is war. War is raw. And it wasn't an accident that Donald Trump was on reality TV in 2003 saying, "You're fired," as we were witnessing the birth of a new war that expanded in many destructive ways since 2002, 2003. As we've seen people literally, in many cases, lose their jobs, we have this individual on TV, "You're fired," playing this authoritative role. We were being conditioned way back when, on purpose, deliberately, through the mainstream, to worship this fuck who has his own connections to the porn industry, who literally talks about grabbing women by the pussy, who literally has been accused of rape. And I suspected then, what others have reached their own conclusion, that this type of depiction of Trump as a misogynist womanizer did not hurt his chances with his base, nor the female base on the GOP on the right. No, it actually made him more popular. Okay, you understand what I'm saying? It actually made him more popular. Not only his racist rhetoric, but his misogynist rhetoric, because we are a nation, we are a planet of slaves. And while I don't attack Muslims, what the people in the Middle East need to do in their own culture is rise above the consciousness of slavery. And that is the idea of owning their children and owning your woman. Just pure male domination, because just pure male domination and the suppression of the female does not make a good man's life well, does not help a man attain greater levels of spirituality, because our goal here is to evolve beyond this purgatory prison planet to where they want us violent and they want us hypersexual and they want us creating more slaves on this planet through the procreation process. Nothing wrong with creating a child and sexuality, but they want to control who the humans have sex with and who they do not have sex with and how those children are being raised. And so we have elements of society exposing the programming, but they need to look full spectrum now and see where the right is responsible as well as the left. And so on the left, we have, as I exposed when it happened, I exposed Joe Biden touching the children in the first week that CNN released that 2-hour presentation. That is the 2-hour presentation where Joe Biden in 2014 was inaugurating or bringing in various new congressmen, signing them in, swearing them in, and touching young children at the ages of 8 years old, 9 years old, all the way up to 13, 14, and whispering in their ear and touching them around the breast area. And this was done straight out in the open. And people like David Pakman, who make very good points about the right from time to time, were friggin' defending this behavior. There are people on the fucking left that act like they're pushing back against the racist right-wing agenda. And they won't admit when there is sexualization of the children. So what does that do? It makes the people on the right see themselves as the sole saviors of the children. Hence, save the children in the QAnon movement, when that is not the full truth. There is sexual morality in the U.S. military and in right-wing politics and thinking and in racist ideologies that relates to the oppression of women, certain types of women around the world. And so, we have this false version that they are the great white saviors, pushing back against the demonic, blood-drinking, adrenochrome-drinking, as they say, Democrats. And that's not the full truth. That's not full spectrum. The sexualization of the children and the human trafficking program is the result of a bipartisan cover-up on both sides, the Democrats and the Republicans. And people need to reach that level of awareness and abstain from political worship. And so we should not promote those in our society that promote war and murder, but we should also not promote those and stand with those that are sexually immoral, that are likely perverts. And so we see this as the case with multiple US presidents without fail, but especially the last two and those that support them. So on the left, we see in many cases sexual innuendo of a homosexual nature in which men are humping the butts of other men, and this is being shown to children at some of these drag shows. And so there are people out there that are defending these drag shows that act like by defending those drag shows, they're in general coming to the aid of gay rights in general, or LGBTQ and what other numbers or alphabet letters they've added to that. And that's not the case. In many ways, what is being done at some of these drag shows works against gay rights. And so, like, people need to understand that there is the sexualization of children, and it's happening in mass worldwide. And it's not just happening in this country as this demonic racist program, not just a demonic pornography program, but the racist program is worldwide, with racism being an issue all around the world and sexual violence being an issue all around the world. And these two are intertwined. And so we can look at, for example, the nation of India, by the way, how we can see an increase in, and they have their own caste system where there is oppression based on the color of the skin. Whereas in their culture, the darker the skin, the more the oppression or the lower they are in the caste. And so here is this parallel to white supremacy that we see, but it's not happening with Anglo-Saxons. It's happening with people that are of the Hindu faith. And there is a lot of extreme prejudice and suppression of Muslims there as well. It's sick. Now, that doesn't mean that all Indians are racist or are to blame. It's the programming. And we need to realize that these programs are taking place worldwide. That it's not just one group or one bloodline on the planet that is sexually perverse, that it is something that is inherently possible with all the world's ethnicities, and everyone individually is responsible for raising themselves up above the temptations of this world and identifying between what is a conscious expression of sexuality and what is an unconscious expression of sexuality. So what I won't do in this recording is go so far as to demonize sex or to demonize masturbation, although for some people, right, there is purpose in abstaining for at least a period in time, as long as they can, from that behavior to build their spiritual body up. I remember coming across a book that a friend showed me in the late 90s that related to the retention of sperm as opposed to the constant release of sperm, and how the retention of sperm had something to do with a higher level of chi or prana, or you can even see it as a stronger auric field around a person. And I find these ideas to be highly, highly interesting. And so these are not things of an incel category. People should be suspicious of attempts to move things into an incel category or a MGTOW, MGTOW category. There should be healthy dialogue about becoming more conscious human beings, having more conscious relationships, having and that includes refining our sexuality. And I've talked about this in various ways over the years, but I have ultimately delisted that content because it was widely attacked. It was not understood. And the content that I was saying, the words that I was speaking, was not the same thing that others were saying. Others were saying, oh, the white women in the West, they prefer dark men. They prefer foreigners. This is white genocide. And they were getting on board another conspiracy theory instead of dealing with the true reality of what is taking place. And even within the reality of some women preferring darker men, but in this case, we were talking about African-American men, that is promoted heavily in mainstream media and society. But that's coming from the top down. That's coming from those that control the algorithms. That's not coming from some foreigner group. That's happening within our own society. The stuff that's being depicted. and the type of racial violence that's being depicted towards white women in many, many cases. It's all over our internet. Why would our society be allowing that and promoting that and allowing children to find that so easily? This stuff is traumatizing. And people coming across this, and I'm hitting this from 1,000 different dots, can lead some people towards white supremacy by seeing how they're seeing, in many cases, their sisters demonized in pornography, being molested and abused by other ethnic tribes and groups. And seeing that for years and years and years can absolutely lead to radicalization. Absolutely. Think about years and years and years of a young white man who's never had an actual date in his life because of all the things in society that is interfering with one's ability to have a romantic relationship, the mind control, the way that we're isolated, the way that we're turned against each other. Many people do not have a healthy experience the way that it should be when it comes to their first time, if they even get to that point. And so if they're looking at years and years of content from, like, some people say they watch porn when they're 5 or something. That's crazy. That's crazy. My experience was much, much later in life, although I did see things when I was young, and it did disgust me. But I did see things when I was young. But today, it's much more hardcore and much more younger because of the rise of cell phones and technology. When the internet was not around when I was 10. And so a lifetime of seeing their own ethnicity being abused sexually by other ethnicities, they can come under a certain level of trauma and be really, really affected by that. In addition, Twitter promotes videos showing people getting their ass kicked in the street. I quit Twitter for more than one reason. Not only was it the rise in glitches that I was experienced in the sense of being spied on, distrust of Elon Musk and his SpaceX agenda and his connections to China. I did not feel safe and secure posting certain articles because I felt like I'm hitting too close to the truth. I feel like they're acting like, we'll put this out there that these things are happening, but someone can end up on a radar if they actually repost certain content or look at it. So it feels like certain things are a trap right now, like showing online or social media how much you know or what's really on your mind, how deep your understanding of the agenda is. Certain statements that we make can bring someone under the radar, not to put people in fear, but a lot of it seems like a trap. And so there's a massive brainwashing thing going on Twitter, where they're promoting white nationalists and neo-Nazis that were previously deplatformed, and they're showing violence of various ethnic groups attacking other ethnic groups. And so it's important for us to be aware of the rise in black on white violence and other groups, and the rise in white supremacy. But a lot of that content, also Latino violence, other forms of violence, an overabundance of that can brainwash someone into thinking that that group is hyper dangerous. And so that's where I'm coming from the fact that saying that there are various programs out there to keep us in fear of certain groups. And so I can expand on this in the future. I'm already going too far off topic, but this is related, bring it back now, to why you see so much different types of racial violence in pornography today. It has to do with the real world racial strife that's taking place. And so at the very minimum, there's financial profit from these dark thought forms that people have towards each other. The violent sexual fantasies. There's the profit. They're profiting greatly. From another level, as I suggested, there's a dark spiritual presence over it, and people can become partially possessed or influenced by dark spirits in some way, or compromised in some way, even if their souls are ultimately good. I do believe in the idea that we can redeem our souls and take our souls back from the devil, so to speak. We can't really ever sell our souls. Our souls already belong to God if we're from source creation to begin with, but we can, in some circumstances, lease our own souls or allow an aspect of ourselves to be corrupted if we're not keeping our mind in check. And so I'm seeing a rise in people talk about how there's many people out there that profess to be Christians, that are pastors, that are involved in either this consumption or the consumption of CP or child porn, or those that are being arrested in various human sex trafficking stings, which happen across the nation on a regular basis. And we are often seeing teachers. We are often seeing police officers. We are often seeing judges. We are often seeing various people in authority, white men in particular, that are involved in attempting to have sex with a child. And so this is not being said so that people become racist towards white people. No, that they realize that this type of depravity can exist in every single culture and should be resisted in every single culture. There shouldn't be any sexual oppression in any culture on the planet. And there's many out there that have claimed to liberate women from controlling men and sexual oppression when bringing their own. So there's also stories that I've read about how in the fall of Iraq, there was a rise in Iraqi prostitutions having sex with U.S. troops on a voluntary level, but also the increase in pornography to where those sexual acts have been put out there on the internet. As I alluded to before, through my own unconscious behavior and consumption at times of adult content, I have witnessed a rise in content labeled Muslim. And again, in the society in which these Muslim countries have been occupied, isn't it interesting that for years there would be the promotion of sexual violence of these women, of putting them into prostitution, of degrading them, and that there would be a long-standing history of that happening in the US. And so the whole occupation of Afghanistan was never really about liberating women, nor Iraq. In many cases, the situations that women are in today in the Middle East is far worse as a result of occupation compared to the structures that they were under before. And it would take a little longer to explain. This is not the time for that. But much corrupt money from Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Western powers have influenced the rise of radical Islamic groups and the Taliban to begin with. Whereas if you go back to the 50s, for example, in the 60s, and you look at places like Kabul, Afghanistan, you see women walking around in freedom without burqas, eating at restaurants, going to theaters. They're walking around without a leash amongst men. And they are allowed to do this because they had a different government structure. And so what the world doesn't understand, right? The devil's biggest trick is pretending the world, convincing the world that it doesn't exist. The deception here is that the Western world is coming to liberate the women of the world. And in many cases, the people that control immigration and control policy and control many things on the internet and beyond with regards to big tech are in many cases complicit in human trafficking around the world, if not directly involved in it. And I've always suspected that many women in occupied countries have been trafficked to various places in the world, probably Saudi Arabia, to where, you know, those groups and that dark bloodline that, of course, our society is connected to, the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, or Donald Trump in Saudi Arabia, Donald Trump in Saudi Arabia with his hands on the globe, Elon Musk in Saudi Arabia, last year giving a speech. We see the elite of the world in the West that control things here connected with Saudi Arabia, which has its own form of hyper-conservative, radicalized Islam to where they literally round up dissidents. Saudi Arabia, yeah, where Google and Microsoft is going to build a cloud system, but it's going to be there. It's going to be there in Saudi Arabia. So when people put up certain types of information or they criticize their new 15-minute AI-run surveillance city, right? That's coming, that's being built by 2030, one of these new high-tech, new world order globalist cities. They're literally arresting and in some cases assassinating, according to an article that I read on Microsoft. So they're admitting this. This isn't a conspiracy theory. So Microsoft will admit that it itself, Microsoft and Google, are in partnership with Saudi Arabia, and it's going to lead to the downfall of many dissidents, people that have stood up against the system. And so they can say out of one side of their mouth, women in Saudi Arabia are allowed to go out without men. And so things are doing better in this country. So they're somehow more superior than other Middle Eastern poor countries, but they're not. They're highly racist. They've done a lot of messed up things to Middle Eastern countries around the world, the Saudi Arabian kingdom. They're more than likely absolutely being controlled by evil. And so I see their involvement in this future disruption, possibly even human trafficking. So we have Russia, China, we have Saudi Arabia, we have other countries, and we have our own corruption within this own shadow government. And there's many ways in which individuals are allowed to operate worldwide, and nobody stops them. That's talking about the people that run these websites. The connection between, this is going to be a longer discussion. There are documentaries that have been featured already on streaming video content like Netflix that have talked about a possible connection between MindGeek and organized crime, human trafficking and or drug running. And so this cat is already out of the bag. That there is like a secrecy behind this corporation and the people that run it. And it's believed that the person that does run it, that is, there's videos about him on YouTube. There's interviews with him on YouTube. He does not appear to be like, the devil or the most sinister person of the world. This white guy that is behind MindGeek, but it's widely believed that he is just a front man, just as Elon Musk may be a front man, just as Prince Eric Prince may just have been a front man. Later, Blackwater changed to another name, maybe Z. And then we see the connection between Blackwater and far-right groups, paramilitary groups, Donald Trump, and the ethno-state agenda. Well, we see a connection between these groups and people that have committed war crimes in Afghanistan and Iraq, which are obviously racist in nature. So, the people that control MindGeek and these websites, the real people and the real agenda has not been presented to the people of the world. And Congress has not taken action, like I said, against some of the violent pornography or the deep fake AI pornography that is now emerging. And why is that? And so right now, Joe Biden's in power, and people are convinced that it's just a left-leaning satanic agenda to sexualize the children. But these things have been taking place under multiple administrations, just as the atrocities in the Middle East that have happened to the Iraqis, Afghanis, the people of Yemen, and other countries have taken place under multiple administrations. People need to wake up, and the left-right paradigm is not going to help them. And people hearing my voice in the future that just want to hear about criticisms of pornography and violence towards women, they need to look at this from a larger perspective. That's what I'm interjecting. I'm showing the parallel here in this epidemic, in this real rape culture. I'm exposing right now rape culture and how it supersedes pornography by explaining to you that there was an element of rape culture that has been allowed during recent occupations of the Middle East. And in this rape culture that is on pornography, they are promoting racial violence, and they are promoting authority figures, people in authority, committing sexual acts against various women. And there may be a variety of similar themes in the genre of gay pornography. I have not actually studied that, but this is obviously a pro-rape society that cheers on the idea that people get raped in prison. Some women get off, apparently, on the idea of obviously heterosexual rough sex, but also some people have an attraction to watching gay rough sex as women. There are men and women that enjoy that type of content. Yeah, it's quite an interesting species. So we covered the fact that it's an apocalyptic thing that they're projecting through the films and through the animations. Briefly mentioning that we have streaming video content, which also shows the dystopian theme, which can put people into fear and despair that the world is ending. And this constant program of the world ending, or a simulation, or maybe an event where people think the world is ending, or the world has already ended, or that they're going to die. And people could be put in that situation through a war situation that's controlled. And they could then lose hope and fall into sexual slavery, either by allowing themselves as a woman to be put into sexual slavery, or a man engaging in sexual slavery or oppression towards a woman. And so there's a lot of people out there that are being promoted with this type of rape content, who are being given ideas that a certain percentage absolutely wants to act out. Some don't, And they just do a sexual release because it's part of the human DNA to be like that, unfortunately. It's in the programming. And then some people actually act on that, make plans out of that. And so there could be there already are stories of it happening, and women experiencing experimenting at a young age with gangbang activities and having to go to the hospital and have surgery in some cases, or in some cases some experimentation has led to death. And there's been also deaths, yes, on the set of some porn sets where they have simulated violent sex and people have actually died. And like, this has not really been. And what does the mainstream get shown right out in the open? These dark rituals at the Emmys, at the Grammys, where women are sexualized and dancing in cages, jumping to that as well, showing how like this is a subconscious program. Like literally, kids could be programmed by watching the Grammys and the Sam character who's playing this devil character, and he's got all these women and maybe transsexuals or whatever that are dancing around him on all fours, dancing in a cage. And I see that, and I say something that others aren't saying, that this is the elephant in the room. They're programming society from multiple angles to be sex slaves, or to be dumbed down and numb to the fact that we're being programmed to be sex slaves. As they put out, like I said, certain levels of programming to say that this is part of feminism. This is a woman liberating themselves. We need to support the modern sex industry. I don't want to sound oppressive towards sexuality. I think that we need a higher form of sexuality and liberation. But that is another conversation for another time. The current sex industry, the current way that sex work is being done in the current day and age is a dark place. There was a woman that opened up a cuddle house years ago, and I knew it would be a disaster because when you open up the door to things like that, you can still deal with demonic energies when you're, cuddling next to someone, especially if it's all about money. There's something demonic also about the person that has to be paid to cuddle. There's something really sad about that, having to pay to cuddle. I'd rather just not cuddle. But there's a time in my life where I really wanted to cuddle. Never did that, right? But there's a time in my life where I felt more lonely. I guess with age, I feel less lonely. There still is a part of me that's lonely, but it's normal for humans to want to cuddle and be in a state of intimacy. And it's really sad how this world takes away our innocence and fills us up with violent sexual imagery and wars and things like that take us away from romance. And so her intentions may have been well, this person that opened up the cuddle house, but it was doomed to fail because it was done in an area where there's a lot of demonic activity and sexual activity. In the city of my birth, there's a lot of strip clubs. There's a lot of pornography. There's a lot of human sex trafficking, a lot of child sex trafficking. And I did predict that things would get worse in that region. And so in a place like that, where sexuality has a lower frequency for the most part, there's a lot of sexual experimentation while people think that they're liberating themselves through the kink. In many cases, they're not. And so her business did not succeed. What probably happened was a lot of weirdos came in, and she may have taken in a lot of bad energy by being close to a lot of people. And maybe it wasn't successful. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't as successful financially as she wanted to be, but like there's a cost that comes with the transference of energy. And there's different types of transferences of energy that can happen. It can also happen on the internet between the therapist and the patient and the medical profession, but there's transference of energy in sexual encounters. But there's also transference of energy between people in general. And so, if you're having contact with someone that has demonic entities or attachments and you're not clear and you have lower energies, and so if someone's in greed, okay, they're in greed going, okay, I will lay down to you if you give me zeros and ones, if you give me money, if you give me this credit materialism, that could then open up the door to that person's being harmed. There's other ways, I think I've heard about this before, where people involved in certain types of energy work or divination in some cases or magical work can be harmed by their practices, by their energy work, through either becoming sick from the person that they're healing and or other means. But that often is a theme here. So what's happening on the set of many of these pornography movies is the transference of demonic energy. It is ultimately projecting a demonic ritual. Okay, so I'm taking the time to go through this slowly, and this is longer than my normal report. So there's other things that will be seen in either cartoon pornography, which much of it is AI generated now and highly degenerate, and also regular pornography, the videos that are filmed. There will be, in certain cases, the promotion of not only demonic, but demonic symbols. So like the upside down pentagram will be seen. The other term that's used is a magic sigil, C-I-G-I-L. So I have noticed over the years certain types of what is known as Illuminati symbolism or all-seeing eye symbolism or other types of Egyptian symbolism in the forms of tattoos on porn actors that are seen on a regular basis. So there's, and I'm not going to mention names, there's a certain actor who works for Kink who is heavily promoted all over these websites. And I admit to have using this content off and on throughout my life, and am now going to walk away from it. Because it's time that people close the door on these less than conscious influences, even though we're human and sexuality comes natural to us. What I've known for years that certain content was ultimately evil, and that certain actors were evil, and that there are certain clips in which the people act possessed, or the women that were being taken into a violent scene or high level of orgasm were acting demonically possessed as well through their hypersexual behavior and their eyes going back in their head, like something from The Exorcist, so to speak. What I haven't necessarily said as of present is anal sex, the phrase anal sex. This is believed to be something that is something where there is a transference of demons, and there is a wide abundance of anal sex promoted. And as I said, there are people in a sick consciousness in the society that like the idea of people being sodomized or sexually assaulted in prison. Even if in reality that person might be innocent, there's still people that wish that people get raped in prison because they're sick psychopaths, because they're sodomites by nature, because they're demonic by nature. You understand that? Listen to what I said and rewind the tape. There are people in our society right fucking now that think they're all so fucking superior, that wish that others get sodomized in prison. And these are sick son of a bitches. And there are people out there that are being paid that sit there as prison guards and they allow people to get raped or organize either gladiator wars or spectacles in prison where inmates are forced to fight each other, or they organize situations in which race gangs, Nazis, blacks, or others are allowed into someone's cell and they rape someone to keep them in line as a part of the control mechanism. In some cases in which criminal crime groups operate and work with cops and or prison guards or others in authority or the system. And see, this type of nonsense is going to increase. Listen to me carefully. Corruption in law enforcement, corruption in the military, and we're talking about sex crimes in the military also increasing as a result of this pornographic material. Bringing me to, again, another dot. There has been an increase in sexual assault of women in the military. And so far I talked about things troops are reported to have done to victims of war or women in occupied countries. Then there's the things you're never, ever, ever going to hear about that are covered up. And I'm sure that that's the case with regards to young Iraqi, Afghani, and other women being trafficked. And don't forget about the Saudis and what they're doing to the people of Yemen and how they've demonized resistance groups in Yemen that are fighting back against the high-tech Saudi jets and weapons that have been provided for years by not only the Trump administration, but the Obama administration and elements of the Joe Biden administration. Although they may have, Joe Biden's not innocent, but under Joe Biden, they may have pulled back from some of those. They did pull back from some of those agreements to arm Saudi Arabia because they are committing genocide in Yemen. The point is, because of racism, because a lot of people don't care about Middle Eastern people and Muslims have been demonized, Muslim dominant countries, many Americans and Westerners are not aware of the trafficking and the sexual abuse of these people. And they're not being taught at present to have compassion for these people. And so waking up, right, to what's happening to women in the porn industry is going to be maybe step one for people, or people waking up to the fact that there's trafficking going on. Some people are watching The Sound of Freedom, and they want to do something about child sex trafficking that's taking place, although it's much bigger of a situation than what that film is portraying. And so if people really want to save the children and stop the rape of men, women, and children, because it's not just children and women, it's also men. Um, there's also rape, yes, in torture situations to where suspected terrorists have been raped or have been sexually sodomized or anally fed food while they may have been on a hunger strike at Guantanamo or Abu Ghraib. So there's stories about that. Don't forget about the photos at Abu Ghraib where they stripped down the Muslim men and sexually abused them while sicking dogs on them and ordering these naked Iraqi and other men to huddle together in a pyramid. That would be the pyramid of control, as they show a white woman, exemplifying white woman's supremacy, holding a dog on a leash in this case, in the way the white woman has been demonized for years, with the donkey acts over the years in Mexico, and the dog having sex with the woman over the years. Here's the woman that's already been traumatized and demonized, demonizing Arabic men in the pyramid of naked bodies, and they took pictures of it with, yay, the OK sign. Yay, the AOK sign, which some people have adopted as a white supremacy sign. Also a sign that looks like the 666 or the AOL sign. Just a quick reference to Illuminati symbolism. But again, I mentioned that earlier, did I not? That there is certain Illuminati all-seeing eye symbolism and pyramid symbolism and other Egyptian symbolism in pornography today on the tattoos of the actors. And see, the awareness of what I'm getting into. I've been of this opinion for a long time. And I have always seen these things as highly taboo to even talk about, to even speak about. Yeah. The next point. So there was a documentary that was exposing a person by the name of, I'll just say it, Max Hardcore, and YouTube removed it. YouTube removed their other documentaries. Barely Legal is on the Beyond Fantasy, Barely Legal. That's the name of it. And so, like, recently, in the last couple of weeks, they took it off YouTube, and it was basically exposing the porn industry. And so YouTube is owned by what? Google. And what does Google do? Google allows this widespread distribution of all types of violent, murderous, sexual fantasy material, accessible to children around the world or wherever this material is allowed to be. And like I said, there's ways in which it's allowed to access this content, or people can access this content in places in which it's actually against the law. In certain Islamic countries, possibly Saudi Arabia. So it's like entrapment. It's like, watch something, yeah, but it's also illegal. And they entrap people other ways. And ultimately, consumption of this material, promotion of this material is evil in and of itself. I want to, again, going back to one particular video in which I was listening to a porn actress share her experiences. There are things happening psychologically within women in society that perpetuate sexual slavery that's never discussed. And some of it is a programming that's biological within ourselves that society does not admit to. But there's a certain amount of sexual slavery that seems to be just embedded within our DNA that people will, in some cases, naturally gravitate to because it makes them feel good. So, like, women being submissive to a certain degree with men or boyfriends, maybe not in a pornography situation, but in a promiscuous situation or a situation with their spouse or boyfriend, to where they are being dominated in some way. Why is that? Why is that within our DNA? Okay, are there other forms of human sexuality that humanity has ignored? Are there ways in which we have been brainwashed in the society to gravitate towards the depravity? If so, why? Because there are other forms. There are other forms of sexuality. I remember seeing this as a young child through books at the age of 14, books at the grocery store, no, excuse me, at the bookstore, and them depicting various positions that like resembled yoga postures, like various yoga postures and ways of stretching and humans connecting through like, you know, a bizarre type of dance. So that's something that you don't see. So like there's like evidence throughout human history that human sexuality has been expressed in different ways. And so unless someone already knows that or comes across that information or those perspectives, in today's day and age, they're not going to see those perspectives promoted or shared. And there might even be certain people or certain individuals that claim to be spiritual, that claim to be into tantric, that are still into the old game of energy vampirism, of trying to pass on spirits, sexual spirits, back and forth. Biblical people often mention incubus and succubus. But see, there are people out there with questionable intentions that are involved in some of those groups. In today's day and age, one has to be very careful where they get their information, who their partners are, even what types of material possessions that they take on, because everything has magnetism. We are in a day and age in which, there's been an increase in paranormal activity and interference. And there has been a rise in female suicides since 2010, since 2011, 12. And what have we seen in that time period? We've seen an expansion of this type of content. We've seen an expansion of other types of violent content. We've seen the expansion of computer processing power. We've seen the expansion of robotics. And on that note, yes, we're being introduced the idea of the sex bots. We're being introduced the idea of people's sexuality interconnecting, not just with alien beings and demons, but with robotics. And where is this going to lead? Is this going to lead to other types of genetic engineering or attempts to create a hybrid new species? There is reference to the plan to create a new man. There's been various references to the new man from various perspectives. It was also mentioned by Adolf Hitler. There's been like a wide variety of experimentation within our own society, also known as transhumanism. And so it's interesting to see that there is this rise in sex bots. There is this rise in all these things, as we've seen a massive decline in healthy, normal human relationships and sexuality. In many cases, these things are a thing of the past. And so I'm going to start wrapping things up. These are things that are highly controversial. These perspectives and more are perspectives that are going to shatter certain people's belief systems. And in some cases, they're going to make certain people upset. But this is a time in which we're going to see some very unfortunate events that have been planned for a long, long time. There are many people that believe that we are in the day and age of the Antichrist returning, and this is believed in various faiths. There's a lot of focus on 2025 being the kickoff date for something significant on this planet. I'm not predicting the end of the world, but we are seeing world events move very quickly into motion with the rise of hacking, with the rise of cyber attacks, with the rise of AI, with the rise of threats to the grid, with the rise of robotics, with the rise of the military industrial complex and high-tech missiles that have been developed all across the world that can result in massive devastation and the end of our society as we know it, basically, essentially, the end of a situation in the future where women are able to call 911 for help. And what happens when that happens? Okay, we have criminal groups and other individuals acting on their programming and engaging in the oldest form of employment, which is not, in my opinion, prostitution, but human trafficking, the buying and selling of women and or children and or other slaves. And so I'm not here to be a false prophet, to put people into fear, but to say that everything that I've seen over the course of the last decade has convinced me that we are on this path, that there is this plan of enslavement of women worldwide under this global system that some people believe will be controlled by the Antichrist. And so this is a time where people need to purge themselves of their unconscious behavior, of their sins. People need to reel in their lust. People need to reel in their racial hatred. People need to reel in their tribalism. People need to reel in their internet addiction. People need to understand that as human beings in this fallen world, we have to rise above our own demons. Because as human beings, we come with certain complications. We come with certain challenges. We come with certain shortcomings. That's why we're not already in heaven. We're not already in angel form. We're not already at that level. We're not already a god or a goddess or an archangel, but maybe we are on the path to becoming more than a mortal. But in order to embark on that path, we have to do certain levels of work. And some of us are tasked with exposing certain things because we're at a certain level or frequency where we're able to interpret things or certain ideas. And that's exactly what I've done over the course of the last 2 hours. And someone could take this information and could choose to embark on a path to where they also try to heal themselves of the unconscious energy, the apathetic energy, but that they also choose to use their influence to wake others up, to not just let this be a personal experience. For a lot of people on this planet, they're into a personal spiritual experience. They're just thinking that it's about meditating and attaining a higher consciousness and not responding to the negativity. And that's just part of it. Yes, at a certain level, we need to rise above our news addiction. I do as well, to responding negatively with fear and trauma to the things that are happening in this world. But in some circumstances, we have a responsibility, and collectively we have a responsibility to use our collective gift of communication, because humans have been gifted with communication at a level that other animals at different levels have not been gifted. Not to say that animals aren't communicating in the animal kingdom, but we have a unique ability to communicate complex ideas through verbal speech, through text messages, through articles, through blogs, through podcasts. We have the ability to raise consciousness in a very high way, and we can override the programming of the algorithm if humanity wanted to. It could create its own alternative systems, its own alternative tube sites. For example, there could be alternatives to YouTube that are not pro-Nazi, that are not pro-right-wing, that do allow free speech, but do moderate to a level where harassment, bullying, and racial attacks are not allowed. Okay, but we are not at that level. And so there is this yin-yang aspect of increased intelligence and increased intuition as we attempt to shift consciously into something higher than what we were in the past. And then there is outreach to others. And so there is a certain level of evolution that many men and women need to embark on. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And that means more refined spirituality and sexuality. And so for women, that means not getting into dangerous, promiscuous situations with violent men because they have a physical programming that leads them into some of those experiences because of the pleasure that they get from it. Same thing for men. A more refined spirituality would be higher caliber, higher quality men and women finding each other, and on a more advanced level, a society in which more conscious men and women are having children and educating those children into higher consciousness things, into a type of consciousness that is trying to reform society. And also notice how all these types of ideas of reforming society and reforming modern medicine and becoming overcoming racism and reforming prison and reforming the legal system, notice how the right thinks all those things are negative and as of the woke agenda or the left democrat agenda. See how that's demonized when it shouldn't be demonized? There should be reform of law enforcement. There should be reform of the legal system. There should be reform of the education system. Kids should be way more prepared at the high school level for the world that's going to await them afterwards. There's so many things that I could have been taught or warned about or educated about by either my parents or education beforehand. And so education is important, but it has to be accurate education. There's many forms of education that are called higher education that are only doing one thing, and that's programming people to be slaves. And so for women around the world, there has to be a greater shift in consciousness with regards to compassion for other women that are oppressed around the world, not just in this country, not just in pornography films that are made in the West, but situations that women fall into in other countries that are controlled by the West or occupied by the West. Okay. And there are issues obviously going on in other cultures in which there is the ongoing oppression of women that is being allowed on some levels, in some cases, by women that have been brainwashed. And so we do see some examples of women in Iran and other cases rising up against the burqa or rising up against certain revolutions. Sometimes, however, those Middle Eastern protests and uprisings are actually being orchestrated by the West in order to get us deeper into a divide. They're not always necessarily liberating those women. There is the projection, however, in the mass mind control machine, in the matrix, that that's always what they're doing. That the West is always running around the world, liberating women from the burqa, liberating women from the dark men around the world, and bringing them into the America in which they are free, in which they are empowered to be their own taxpayer, to be their own slave, to where they are dependent in many cases on the government or a corporation to provide for them. So nothing wrong with women working on their own, but we have been actually divided on our own to where we all are individual slaves to the system, the government, the man, in our own individual ways. And the tribe has been broken. We've seen the death of the farm as we continue to see farmland bought up by design in this country to take us away from the ways in which families lived off grid or in nature, creating and growing their own food. Again, a deeper topic we've been messed with on so many different levels. And we're not just talking about the United States, we're talking about the Middle Eastern world as well. When we talk about the Saudi Arabian kingdom and environmental degradation and the oil fields. As a result, the modern way in which we've been powering up our cars, which is not the most advanced technology anyways. They've suppressed that technology. But through fracking and through environmental degradation, a few men at the top have become very, very wealthy, and they have created widespread environmental degradation, turning beautiful parts of the world into absolute deserts. And then, of course, there's other ways in which our climate is changing and our world is changing because of natural cycles that have to do with the sun and the solar system at large, our universe, and not just simply things being caused by man. But yes, there are certain things on this planet that are man-made, and the ultimate agenda behind these man-made disasters has not been incompetence or accidental. It has been deliberate. It all has been a part of a demonic program, all of it. Through the rape of the earth, as I've talked about for years, to the rape of the people. As the earth becomes more raped, more degraded, more controlled, with more holes being stuck in the earth, with more oil being pumped out of the earth, with more of the earth's energy being manipulated through CERN and 5G technologies. See, thus the humans, which are of the earth, of clay, according to Genesis or the original spiritual text, or similar also to the Quran, the human being made of these physical elements of the earth is subjected to what is taking place to the earth. They are not disconnected from the earth or what is happening to the earth's core, whatever that is, and if or that connects to hell. So what is taking place to the earth and the rape of the earth absolutely affects human relationships down to the local level. That is pollution of the waterways, pollution of the airwaves, pollution of the skies. These things and more, while people live as rent slaves, as bondage to the system, they will then put each other into bondage and inflict pain upon each other and extract pleasure out of that psychopathic response to a psychopathic society. Again, while you have overseas wars taking place, while entire families are being killed by drone attacks. They don't talk about that stuff anymore, but it happened quite a bit in the last 20 years. But they still promote the use of drones because they claim time and time again that they're taking out the heads of terrorist groups. Yeah, if we are to believe what they're being told. Why have they allowed terrorist groups to operate on Twitter and YouTube for years, as certain articles have said, right? Doesn't make any sense. So there's various levels of demonic activity of various kinds, from terroristic to far right to racist to neo-Nazi to sexual violence to CP or child porn, various things, including racial violence and street fighting, that is basically being promoted on the internet. And again, with a side dish of a great deal of new age bullshit. With the supposed spiritual people of Earth, channeling alien beings that are absolutely, in many cases, a part of this agenda. This whole, demonization agenda is a part of the enslavement of the human species. I do use a pendulum here and there to ask it certain questions, and I do think that I get certain guidance from it. And so I've noticed that it is giving its perspectives on this topic, and it did suggest that, this industry in general is demonic and is to be condemned and avoided. And I saw someone who was putting out other disinformation online suggest that, not only does he want people that took the vax to die, and not only is he okay with white supremacy, he thinks he knows what the in-game agenda is for mankind, and it's the hermaphrodite agenda. And I asked the pendulum, is that the case with this? As I'll do now, is what he said accurate? Is what he said accurate? And not only do I feel that the answer is no, it is no, it is inaccurate. And so there are people out there that think that the in-game agenda is to just absolutely destroy mankind in some way or to alter the gender. And that may not be the ultimate agenda, but it could appear to be that agenda to distort human sexuality as much as possible with what they're doing right now with what is being marketed towards children and the things that are going on in some of the drag shows that the left is defensive about. There's a big defensiveness on the left regarding the drag shows, and many of them think they're coming to the rights of gay people by defending the idea that certain things are being done in front of children. And they're not willing to accept that there's something unhealthy about that, just as they were not willing to accept, whether it be David Pakman or others, that there was something unhealthy about Joe Biden and the children. Just as the right is unwilling to look at the fact that there's something unhealthy about their leader, saying that it's right to grab women by the pussy, and he's been accused of rape in various times, and he has made sexual statements with regards to his daughter. And none of this has really upset the Christian community. And people need to realize why that is. There's many people out there that talk about how there are many Christian pastors out there that talk about Jesus Christ and how just coming in the name of Jesus Christ will, basically protect you against all things. And I think you actually have to work in your heart to become a better person, in addition to calling out for Christ to help you. Because there's many people out there that profess to be Christians that are okay with people being harmed or murdered, or sexual violence, or pornography. There are many pastors out there that have been busted. Again, when we come to this discussion of child sex trafficking and various stings in this country, we often, time and time again, come up with preschool teachers, PE teachers, pastors, law enforcement, and people in the legal system, maybe in some cases doctors or gynecologists. We are often dealing with people that you would not suspect are involved in these things, and they are. So, when it comes to self-responsibility, women collectively have their own self-responsibility, just like men have a collective self-responsibility to not continue to enslave women, to rise above that ancestral programming. So the ancestral programming with a lot of men, or a lot of women in today's day and age, is to continue to be a slave. And so if they're not being a slave psychologically to, say, a male, then it is the government or the system that is the dominant stream of consciousness. But that system is still a patriarchal, male-dominated system to a certain degree, or is a system that is acoustic to the sacred feminine. It's not a good masculine system. There's a dark feminine and a dark masculine that is running this global system. And so people need to rise above the consciousness that allows them to be so easily influenced and so easily controlled. Okay, so it may not feel pleasurable for them to be on their own, to be lonely, to be in poverty, to not be wealthy, to not be popular on social media. But that is often the spiritual path for men and women in today's day and age, as it has been the spiritual path for monks, the Essenes, other disciples, ascetics throughout history that have chosen to abandon the pleasures of the flesh and the material world in pursuit of a higher spiritual experience. It's something that even the Buddha sought at one point, but he did come to a realization, the Buddha did, that he was going to extremes and then he needed to find the middle way. And a lot of people need to find the middle way. There are a lot of people in extremes looking for perfection. There's a lot of people in the Christian church that say, if you do this, this, and this, and this, you're sinning, when they need to find the middle way and realize that many people can serve God by trying to make the world a better place, not necessarily praying in a certain way. And this is also a message to many Muslims that may not truly be serving God or spiritual, that it's not just a matter of the worship and giving energy to a certain deity. And I'm highly suspicious of religions and belief systems that just do that, that just give their power away. No, I think the true creator of that which is truly above this reality and the false creator of this world wants us to work towards making the world a better place. So back to refining sexuality. In a true consciousness shift, if we were in one, which we're not, we would see a shift on the local level with regards to that. And we would not see kind men, good men, completely ignored. Okay, that's not to say that, women owe something. No, I'm saying that if you have a society where the bad dominant men are constantly the one that are basically procreating their energy, their seed, as it's commonly called, then that's not a conscious society. Consciousness needs to really shift dramatically to see a different population, and it has to do with the types of humans that are attracted to each other and why. Intention. Intention is everything. And there's, of course, responsibility for the male side. And we can go back and forth and back and forth. And it actually takes a great deal of contemplation to get even a partial picture of the true responsibilities of today's man and woman. But the man's responsibility is, of course, to rise above lust, to rise above domination, to rise above only being attracted for those that are dating and looking for wives and things of that nature, when itself can be a trap. When that becomes one life's goal, that can take one away from serving God and stepping against the evil system, working against the evil system, standing up against the evil system. But a man needs to rise above the expectations that certain women that he's pursuing owe him something. So there is something to be said about people that may wait before they go at it. Because, of course, as I said before, I've had many experiences where it went from 0 to 60, where maybe not after the first date, but after the second or third that we were going to that level. And then at that level, there was no more of that. Or with certain people, it was just about that. As in when we hooked up or when we were together, we just engaged in that activity. But there was no working together to make the world a better place. There was no deep agreement either with the people that I had been with on the real nature of this conspiracy and what's happening on the earth. That was always rare to come across people that were aware. And just being aware of the problem or elements of the conspiracy does not necessarily automatically draw in spiritual people either. So there's more to it than that. And I was naive about a lot of things in my younger years. And with experience and with time, I've gotten a larger part of the picture. And I've come to understand in my own life how certain things may have happened to me of a negative nature through being compromised energetically. And so I can think about, these times in which through my own compromise sexually and being involved with certain people that were not of the light, that were natural born vampires, not to demonize women in general, but certain people that are attracted to you have certain spirits and have certain agendas. And they may be attracted to just hang out with someone one time to have a readout of their energy, to get closer to that person. You hear that phrase, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. Where's that come from? That's almost crazy talk. I don't subscribe to that thinking, but many people do. What if that thinking and other talking points and thought forms come from the alien or the demonic realms? And so, if you have that type of strategy taking place, then evil spirits that are monitoring certain humans or at war with certain humans that are sharing their light, they can absolutely use. It's not just intelligence agencies that do that, or mafia groups or intelligence groups. They can use certain individuals to come in as potential mates and cause some sort of interference. Now, it's interesting how Gmail will consider this woman who I'm going to mention, her newsletter, spam when it's not. She wrote The Alien Love Bite. We're talking about Eve Lorgan. Eve has talked about the alien agenda behind human relationships. How oftentimes there is a dark Cupid, like the idea of Cupid pulling an arrow. Eros, Eros, if you will, the angel of lust or compassion or passion, romance. Dark Cupid is her book. The idea of there being a dark influence behind why some people are compelled to jump into relationships with other people. And that can include wild decisions that are not rational, like moving across the nation or jumping into this. And again, with women that are duped into participating in certain adult content where they, answer certain ads and they're being told that this is what's going to happen and they do it anyways, even though it's a bad experience. That is probably a dark influence as well that they have. They could be influenced internally by thoughts in their head that they think are their own, but they're not their own. And there are those thoughts that are of the demonic realm. I also, for years, have used the term archonic realm, which is Gnostic. And so they could be manipulated by these thought forms to be a slave, to enslave others, to be silent about the enslavement or others, or to be a part of the enslavement program of others. And again, haven't made this point yet. There are women involved in this that are involved in the abuse and or trafficking of other women. And so we hear about this on one level of our society. A more mainstream example of this would be Epstein and the female, Maxwell, I believe was her name. And so even though Donald Trump is connected with this, see how people are in denial that Trump is a part of the system? They're not really willing to be those that are going to stand against sexual violence against all the people that it's perpetuated with, because they're blind to the fact that Donald Trump is likely connected with this. And so Maxwell was the female associate of Epstein, and she helped in the grooming process. And there's many examples of this in which females are used to entrap, in some cases, various women into human trafficking. Times in which human females are used as a front to gain the trust of people that would later be victimized, because it's not assumed by everybody that women are doing this or that women are capable of this. But it's true. It came out about 10 years ago, by the way, and that there are certain types of deranged adult content that is very popular with women. And so this shatters a misconception that is just strictly content that is marketed towards men. And there are certain websites that cater towards creating certain content that is primarily marketed towards the female. And so none of what I'm saying is made up. None of this is conspiracy theory. None of this is delusional. There's plenty of articles now that document what I thought was going on the entire time. Jumping back to something else that I was hitting on. So the WWE, formerly known as the WF, has been promoting an increase in violence towards women in the last decade. But actually longer than that. We can actually go back to Elizabeth and Macho Man Randy Savage and violence being perpetuated towards her in the ring. And then Macho Man fights Hulk Hogan over the situation. And so it was actually going on before 9/11. But after the 2000s, we went into a great level of darkness with the rise of the internet. But even before the internet rose and online pornography was available worldwide, there was professional wrestling. And at various levels, it was inserting various scenes of women being abused. And this was being normalized. And to me, this is ritualistic because you literally have men and women in the crowd, in the modern Roman spectacle, in the modern gladiator ring. You have men and women that are what? Programmed to what? Boo that? No, to cheer that on. Sure, they're going to boo that in some cases if it's the heel, but in some cases it's not the heel, it's the hero that's engaged in the abuse. Or even if it's the heel or the villain, the depiction of the domestic violence is still affecting the crowd as they sit there and watch it. It's all being normalized, and it has an effect on the young children that are there in attendance that are watching this. And so, yeah, I was entertained by elements of pro wrestling years and years ago on the local level in my hometown, and the WF in the 90s and the 80s. But that's before it became pure evil and started promoting all these death themes and Undertaker type characters, not just him, this guy that's going to take you to the underworld and that satanic theme, but other forms of dark themes in which the villains, in a way, became popularized and heroes. And so I noticed I had a few videos up that criticized the WE, and one of them featured a clip from Goldberg that said one of the reasons that he left the WF, the WWE, was because he didn't want to go along with beating up women in the scripts. I literally have this video, and I delisted it along with a lot of other of these perspectives that I've shared over the years, not because I felt wrong or embarrassed because of it, because it felt like, I'm hitting too close to the truth. And there aren't enough good people out there supporting me for my work and thanking me for addressing these things. And so covering some things only puts you on the radar to those that are actually perpetuating this propaganda. And especially in today's day and age with AI, all my information after all these years on social media, Facebook, written, podcast, video, are predominantly being analyzed and taken in by AI rather than a human being, because it's not being promoted to the humans. And so all this work, all this lifetime of work, what has it been for? Who has it reached? The machine has worked against me, but I'm not giving up. But I'm bringing awareness to the story because it's on my mind. That I talked about this back in the day, and I got a notification one day from LinkedIn when I had my main LinkedIn profile public, and it says someone visited your profile. And you know who it was who visited my profile, who was looking into me, who was looking at my account? It was the WWE. As I said earlier, they had previously filed a copyright claim in 2012 where I had shown clips from the ring in which women were being beaten and the crowd was cheering it on. And I was sitting there commenting on it, so I wasn't showing a raw clip. It was literally me showing in the video clip over my shoulder the violence taking place. And then the producer, this was back when I had a cable access show, where we had a multi-camera shot where it wasn't just me on YouTube, but I was in the studio, in a TV studio. We had the footage rolling, me talking over that footage. And that clip that now no longer exists should have been backed up and should have been something that more people should have seen. It should have had hundreds of thousands of views. That video should have had millions of views, but they had it taken down. And I talked to someone at the time, because at that time I had gone off grid. I was basically living in a yurt in the middle of nowhere in a really cold part of North America with no money and no internet. And I'm basically staying at a friend's place one night where he has the internet and a fireplace. And I come upon this notification that they filed a copyright claim. So in a panic, because I was always scared about those things, because you get 3 of them, you can lose your channel. I had talked to someone else who at the time was helping me host one of my websites. And he was someone associated with We Are Change, not Luke Radowski, but wearechange.us. And he helped me draw up a appeal letter, real briefly, that basically was a brief apology for using their content and a request that they lift the copyright. And they did. But like I said, years later, I got that notification from LinkedIn that somebody at the WF was looking at my LinkedIn page. And there was another video that I also privated in which I'm speculating on the true nature of the Ultimate Warrior's death. So as I said earlier, we have a parallel between the pornography industry and pro wrestling. For years in the 70s and 80s, these things came up and they met the VHS tape and they met the internet and they have been promoted by the masses. But in reality, you have broken men and women that are being abused in their own way, abused with drugs and alcohol. And in the case of the pro wrestler, they don't have time to recover from their wounds. They're expected to keep going and going and going like the porn star until they break. So thus they're destroyed over time by the experience in mind, body, and spirit. And so now there is a greater level of revelation. Maybe there is somewhat of a shift taking place, but it's not a shift at the level that shows that we have overridden our problems. It's a shift that says we are becoming aware of some of our glaring problems and that which needs to be corrected. And so we have with pro wrestling so many nightmarish stories. And pro wrestling, as it has been known today, has only been around for so many decades. In a short amount of time, it literally has jacked a bunch of men up and turned them into monsters, and their lives have been destroyed. And then we see the same thing with the porn industry. And what is the common theme here? It's the post 1950s, folks. We've been on a steep decline since World War II, socially and morally, and in many ways economically. So there's various types of slavery that are going on in the Western world, and we've been on a downhill slope. 2012 was also a major mark point in the shift in consciousness. So was the year 2000. Like I said, 9/11 affected our world in a very negative way. Who would say on any side that it affected our world in a positive way? And in 2012, we saw a lot of people, right, channeling demons, saying the consciousness shift was here, saying that, this would happen or that would happen or that the end of the world would happen. And what we've really seen is a shift towards a less conscious society, a society that has not ended, but we may be seeing the beginning of the end of civilization. And so when you see man turn against woman and woman turn against man, and so many people deceived by this madness, it is the sign of a major disruption of the collective psyche. And that's what needs healing. So people need to be pointing out the damage that's been taking place in the collective psyche if they want to heal this, not only for people to heal their addictions to this type of content, but for relationships to heal, for young people out there to be making better decisions for themselves. Going back again to what these ex-porn stars are admitting, they're admitting that they have these hardcore fantasies that they want to fulfill, which led them in many of these cases to people that abuse them and harm them physically and mind, body, and spirit. Okay, at some point, there has to be an understanding collectively within consciousness on the female side that they need to this is like really difficult because a lot of people don't want to, but basically refine themselves just like men need to not fall into these traps, to not be dominated by their thoughts and by mass media, that they can find a way to express themselves and feel certain things without doing certain dangerous things. Moving forward, if they were less, okay, so if they have certain desires, they could fulfill certain desires in a healthy way with a healthy partner who's not going to abuse them if they're able to develop a healthy relationship with someone and see certain men in a healthy way and be more attracted to decent men rather than men that are just going to abuse them and throw them away. Now, if some people automatically are going to be attracted to that, then they have a spiritual sickness or some sort of demonic, archonic, or some sort of infection that they need to root out and deal with. But people need to be looking at the root cause of why so many women end up in sexual slavery of so many different kinds in the society, how there's so many different entry points, because it is not completely truthful to present it as a situation in which women are entirely always the victims, in which they're always kidnapped and always trafficked and always molested. That is not always the case. As I'm making the case here, there is a propaganda effort from the moment someone's young to the moment they first come across technology to the moment they're older to manipulate how they express themselves sexually, to how they express their first time and what their first time is most likely to be with, as a lot of people in today's society they're motivated by this type of unconscious media. And so in some cases, they might be traumatized or abused with someone in their first experience instead of their first experience being a positive one. And somehow, some way, that first experience, however it happens, whether it be from the guy next door, a boyfriend, or a family figure, or again, exposure to certain content on TV. So one experience leads to another experience, and therein, unfortunately, a cycle of violence. And so we need to hyper analyze and look at it from an intuitive perspective, not just a psychological perspective, but an intuitive perspective. Why is there this type of cycle of violence that seems to be continuing and in some cases getting worse? Okay, you will not hear from the other critics of modern adult content that there is a connection between this and pro wrestling and the military and this and that and foreign wars and demonic mind control. No, you will not get that perspective from others, but you will get the perspective from some Christians that there's something demonic to this, that we should not do this. They will say in some cases that the behavior, the consumption of said content can lead to the corruption of one's soul and could lead them to hell. Okay. But do those same videos, okay, expose the specific plots and themes that relate to people simulating such abuses while in police uniforms, while in military uniforms, while in other black goon uniforms, and engaging in other things? Do they talk about that? Do they expose that element? No, they do not. What is difficult about that? And so if we're going to expose this thing where there's so much evil, then we're going to expose it front to back. We're not just going to go, there's this person's story and this person's story, and that's the problem there. That's the problem. It's this thing right here. It's this policy right here. No, it's way, way deeper than that. You know, I often imagine other planets and other realities where there is a higher form of sexuality, where there are what we would know as men and women, but they are intermingling on a completely different level. They are not being motivated by racist programming or other types of programming that also promotes certain types of ethnicities coming together, which I haven't really gotten into yet, and then not promoting other types, like demonizing certain types of mixed race humans. Netflix, we see a lot of this on Netflix. We see a lot of this in the mainstream media. We see a lot of the promotion of certain types of mixed race humans, white and black. And so we're constantly hearing about how white people are more suppressed than every other racial group. And in my life experience with what I've gone through that other people haven't, I don't believe that that is the full truth. And racism does exist towards every groups, including whites. And there's plenty of blacks that are racist to whites and other groups other than white, because they're subjected to the same type of anti-immigrant sentiment and propaganda that white people are. And so, it's a deep conversation. We see this type of promotion of certain type of mixed race humans on Netflix and on streaming video content, and it seems synchronized with the theme in most adult websites that, again, in most cases promotes many black men with a single white woman, like gangbang scenarios in animation and film. And again, there's other variants, but this is a very, very popular one, and it's been that way for multiple decades. And so even though we're told constantly that there's strife between white and black, and there is on a certain level, there is really high sexual attraction, though, on another level between white and black. That is evident in adult entertainment, and that is evident in streaming video content. And so this comes across to me as social engineering. I'm not a subscriber in the great replacement conspiracy theory that suggests that white people are becoming extinct, but I am a believer that there is an agenda to create racial strife through the type of media content that is taking place, through world events. And as I said earlier, if someone sees this as at a young age, they see this constant, in some cases, what they perceive to be anti-white propaganda, or all whites being blamed for slavery, or they may see constant promotion of the white woman with the black man, and they're going, where's the white man? Why are you not promoting like white and white, which they do plenty of, but they have steered away from that, in my perception, to cause massive unrest and disturbance. And so that traumatizes people. And so as they don't have a relationship and they end up watching certain types of adult content, what do they see predominantly? Many black men, one white woman. Along with, of course, other variants, as I mentioned earlier. But see, they're going to see this and see this and see this. And they may even watch it and may even enjoy it, but they may resent it. And that may be part of the radicalization process, to where they become part of a worldview where white people are the ultimate enemies, people of color are the enemy, are coming to eradicate the white species, as obviously it's evident in pornography and some immigration policies, where there is some unconscious behavior taking place on the part of some refugees, not all. And then they look at all this content that they're taking in, and also from Tucker Carlson and the Alex Joneses of the world, and they end up with a very violent, psychotic, racist psychology, in which they are victims, but they will ignore the other racism towards other groups that are going on. Because white supremacy is being promoted by Elon Musk, who ironically has just called Twitter X. And as another person said recently, and I'm connecting dots that no man is right now on Earth, there may be a few hundred of us. But like people talk about like being of the 144,000 consciousness, like it's a certain type of consciousness to truly call out the evil in this realm in all its forms. And so I lost my train of thought there. But there was a theme here in calling out all the evil in its manifestations worldwide and not being complicit in it and not holding back. And there's a lot of people that hold back. So again, there's this current media situation in which these things are being depicted, and it has an influence on the youth and their relationships and their experimentation. And so we see a rise in articles now of, I may have mentioned this earlier, yes, people depicting, trying to reenact some of the things they see and ending up abused, raped, kidnapped, trafficked. All different types of things have happened. So yeah, this society has had these issues going on for a long, long time. And things have only gotten worse. And so this nature of evil that we're talking about, that's occupying the spirit of earth at this time, is not limited to one day and age. It's an ancient evil. And it exists all throughout the world. And as mentioned earlier, we've seen highly traumatic examples of things happening in war zones. In the present day, we have overseas and things that have happened there that most people don't know about. Moving a little bit backward, we have the Soviet invasion of Germany. Moving a little bit backward, we have the Russian, the Japanese rape of the Chinese in the Nat King situation. And we also have things that have happened to Native Americans. And there are many people that have Native American heritage as a result of someone being raped in the past. And so there's a lot of this trauma that is there. And so people need to heal from the trauma. They need to heal from the trauma that's been done to them, and they need to work towards removing the trauma or helping others to heal from the trauma, traumatic things that have happened to them. One of the things that I'm noticing, and I've been saying this repeatedly in different podcasts, is there's been a lot of compassion in this country towards certain people of color that have experienced racism. But unfortunately, that conversation has not extended to all groups. So as a result of that, some people in the society think that they are more superior to others, that they are more deserving. And so there are certain things that are coming out now in the news I've mentioned this already, that are constantly making reference to how white people might owe black people because of slavery. And so when you have that constantly being told to people that are living in poverty, that are living in these conditions where they're accessing this type of content, they are being actively brainwashed to put someone else into a position of slavery also, in retaliation for what happened to them. And so none of this is conscious. And there's different forms of unconsciousness that we can see in our day and age in which violence is promoted. And so we can step back from looking at and criticizing adult entertainment, and we can just look at the activist movement now, and even on the left, and how there is such an extreme form of violence, even though there are many on the left and in Antifa that act like they are against fascism, or in many cases, they will also oppress people of color, or drown out people of color, or mace or bear mace or physically attack with batons other people that have a different perspective. I don't support Donald Trump. I don't support the right wing, but I do support someone's right to free speech. I may not agree with what they have to say. I may be extremely against what some people have to say that are on the right, and I am. However, I don't believe that they should be violently assaulted. That only creates more violence. And so when you have a society where people think that more violence is the way, and as I said before, you have many people, even on the left, that are all about cheering on someone's rape in prison. These types of psychologies, these types of attitudes are not the attitudes that we need to quote unquote save the children. And on the right, silence about the victims of war and the demonization of various migrants and immigrants around the world, and acting like you're concerned with the children being kidnapped, but not talking about the racist pornography that is out there, in which white people are being shown and portrayed abusing other ethnic women or groups. One has to be against all of it if they're going to stand against some of it and be effective. And so there's many people out there that are exposing on so many different levels elements of the dark side, but some of their information is compromised because there's some aspect of their psyche or their spirituality or their bloodline or their mentality. It could be a racial mentality, often is with many people today, or a religious mentality. There are certain people out there that even if they're exposing pornography or they're exposing corruption of the New World Order, they may be also promoting an element of disinformation because they haven't come full circle or attempted to come full circle to the true light. Not just to say to come to light generically, but to come to the true light. And so you have certain situations in which you're going to come across content in which they're exposing evil, but there may be something that is disinformation within their message. Or there may be something about them that is compromised to where they're portraying themselves as a superhero of the children, of the women, of the sisters of the world, but there may be something in their corner that is demonic. And so, YouTube auto suggests when I'm doing research on this, various videos, and I check with the pendulum as one video comes up that seems to have some dark symbolism to it, but he's purporting to be, against the adult industry. And I ask the pendulum real quick, yes or no on this individual. Yes or no, and I get a no. And then I open up in a new window his website, and so a lot of this flag waving, nationalistic type of military holding the gun type of consciousness. And so a lot of people are drawn into that sigil information or projection of being a tough guy and a patriot, when in fact, in many cases, they're not. They're just a part of groupthink, a groupthink that says that they're being victimized by the foreign world and that Trump is Lord and Savior. They're worshiping, in many cases, a false idol. And what that does is allow them to be compromised by demonic forces. And so they think in their mind that they're shutting the door to the demonic influence, but they're really not entirely going all the way. I'll give you another example. This guy's talking about in one video an increase in demonic possession by 2025 because of certain prophecies, and that's another discussion for another time. But notice how they have contaminated the society through this type of content as we approach these points in time in which we're in a steep decline of our civilization. It's all by design. There is no accident that they've been corrupting society for this point in time, in which there is a perception in which we will see the rise of the Antichrist or rise in demonic, archonic, or jinn, unseen force, healthy, unhealthy, evil, spiritual forces upon the earth. And he's talking about Alice Bailey and her talking about the externalization of the hierarchy, which sounds like demonic entities that she's calling the ascended masters or the world leaders or the world servants, creating a world government, which isn't good and very much is bad. And if you haven't learned that from the last few years, from the globalist policies in reaction to the coronavirus event, you haven't been paying attention. And people should be awake to that, whether they're on the left and the right. Not only the waste of money that's taking place, but the lockdowns and other measures to control information on the internet. So back to this guy's video and the point that I'm trying to make, while he's warning about possessions as we approach 2025, he himself has not completely purged himself of the dark side because he felt a need to, in his discussion, attack anyone that has any allegations of racism in the modern society. And so by doing that, he's ignoring the fact that there is a connection between the rise in hatred and demonic activity and the use of the occult in the modern day and age, which he as a Christian should be able to see. That there are many so-called Christians and non-Christians that act like they're good people in the West that are involved in various types of occult and racist theologies. There's a lot of magical practices along those lines. So he could have exposed that with his own Christian lens, but because his sight is limited, because his eyes are not fully clear, he is not able to see that. He will in fact demonize that. And yet here he is exposing the rise in possession. So again, there's many examples where there are people out there that are putting out information that's going to speak to us, but we've got to use discernment with these media sources, with these media figures. We should seek to eradicate this evil, not only in the world itself, not through violence, but by teaching people about these things, about the various ancient texts that have exposed the unseen forces in our world and expose how they may be ruling over us and manipulating our world in order to free people. So we should be attempting to expose the evil, not only in the world, but in our own hearts, in our own society, in our own minds. No, people should be willing to go beyond externalizing evil outside of ourselves and point out foreign governments and foreign people and immigrants, and they need to be willing to look at how their own society has enslaved them. And so when we talk about the adult industry and we start talking about other conspiracy ideas, what we're doing is connecting dots. We're showing people, I'm working to show people that this has been done by our own system, by American corporations, by the American government. They are the ones that have allowed this, and they are the ones that are in control. And so what has to happen here is there has to be a rise in consciousness to where people start taking control back over their own minds and their own system and their own matters in their own lives. And see, this is why we've seen the destruction of the family unit, the family unit. There are a lot of people that criticize the destruction of the family while they themselves may also have partaken in unconscious behavior or racist ideologies that have prevented some families from even being formed. Because I'll tell you this, without all the heavy sexual propaganda, without all the heavy violent propaganda and racial propaganda, people would be expressing themselves slightly differently. There would be a different type of demographic coming about upon the planet, different mixes of human beings, if we weren't being socially engineered a particular way. And so to me, there is a racial superiority complex if a group or groups believe that owning their progeny or owning their tribe or owning their seed should reproduce or should be marrying and having children. So again, we see a rise in propaganda promoting certain types of sexuality and mixed race humans having children while we see others left out. While we see certain types of mixed race humans in the society facing more discrimination than those that are both white and black. Again, the white and black combination of genetics is far more normal and normalized than other forms of life. And so a heavily demonized one on the far right, because they're constantly talking about the death of the white race. They're constantly worrying about the mongrel races and Middle Eastern ethnicities. And being a son of a white woman and a son of a Middle Eastern male or immigrant who himself did very well in the society, who made his own share of successes and did not face the type of crap that I faced, which is just bizarre. I know that I have had unique challenges and have faced unique levels of discrimination based on where my father is from that others have not faced. And so because of the racist stigma or stereotype towards Middle Eastern males, having an inclination towards controlling women or sexually assaulting women, and combined with the fact that I'm a person of low status, don't have much money to show, like from a variety of different angles, right? I'm not what women are looking for in the modern day and age. I'm not saying that, right, to be in self-pity, because I've chosen to not be in self-pity about that, to not entertain those thoughts. But there is a reality that will not be changed. And it's a reality that certain people do not procreate, certain people do not continue their lineage because there is a anti-Themism program afoot. Despite all the sexuality and all the sexual programming and all the pornography, certain people are left out. You won't see certain male ethnic figures on camera promoted on these websites fornicating with various white women because that's not what they're promoting. But they will promote, right, the degradation, the sexualization of Middle Eastern, Arabic, Muslim, or East Indian or Asian women on the part of black men or white men. Do you understand? And you should. Because if you're against the spirit of evil that is occupying the earth at this time, you should be against these dark manipulations that are upon the earth that want certain humans to populate and be aplenty and other humans to end up genocided. Because even though there's a mass immigration, right, thing going on that people think is apocalyptic, that seems to be something that is engineered to cause a backlash towards those immigrants and or their children and their children's children. We don't know what's going to be going down in the next couple of years with AI, which has proven itself to be racist. You just type in racist algorithms into YouTube and you'll understand what I'm getting at. And so some people and groups can be targeted based on who and what they are. And there's definitely a certain amount of interference that comes when certain ethnic people and certain souls and certain ethnic bodies or combination of genetics share certain bits of information. And that's what my life story proves. That you can be a person with information that's accurate over the years and still be without love. You can be a good man and still be without love, be without family, be without a mother's love, be without a father's love, as I am. I'm without the love of a mother and father that appreciates me for me and the good information that I've shared over the years to attempt to liberate humanity. You think they really appreciate this information that I'm sharing or ever will? No, because they're of a low consciousness. So this is not beating up on men or women or any ethnic group. Human society at a default prototype personality is of a low consciousness. And so we have a whole plethora of lower consciousness human beings creating more other human beings that are designed to be slaves. That's the agenda of the dark spirits that are manipulating humanity, whether they be seen as demons, aliens, archons, jinn, or other forms of life. Be suspicious of people that think they know what group it is. Not everybody that accuses the agenda of being reptilian is working in the light. Some people that think it's all reptilian have lost their friggin' minds. I'm not denying that it's reptilian. I'm saying that some people that go in that direction and just focus on that don't actually truly understand what spirituality is. And they're lost in psychosis and fear. And ultimately, the evil spirits of this realm want humanity afraid of what these evil forces will do to them. And so that's why this conversation is being had, and it's being had at this moment in time in which we're facing great darkness upon the planet. That is, if we are to protect ourselves against the Antichrist, against these demonic spirits, we have to come up spiritually and rise above to a certain degree of that which we were before, as I said before. So there is shifting our own consciousness on a personal level, and then there is working towards creating higher consciousness for the rest of humanity. So many women have a responsibility to join in on that process and not be misled into the far left or into the far right. Those are both systems of slavery that have their own story and history. And there are various people around the web that seek to expose aspects of both communism and fascism or Nazism and how they have the same source at its root, that people are controlled through both systems. And so we need to see a rise in the sacred feminine that appreciates the good men of this world that are not a part of the system. And so, there could be an attraction to someone or a man that is manly, that can defend himself, that can fight, but we're talking about a man that does not prostitute himself and go around beating other men up for sport, or rolling around on the mat and beating people up all day long at the UFC or some sort of UFC knockoff. And there's many knockoffs of this. And so I'm not knocking combat sports entirely, but I am suggesting that the obsession by today's man with combat sports has led him away from his natural protective role on the earth. See, many men, just as there's a natural sexual nature to women to procreate and have children and engage in certain activities that create more children, also known as sex, men have that natural instinct to protect. And part of protecting is using the muscles and the physical strength to affect reality in a certain way, to hold up a structure. The problem is that's been misused. Through decades and decades and generations of programming, they have taken control over the male warrior, who is in reality not really protecting his tribe. His tribe has been destroyed, be he white, be he Native American, be he black, and they have been brought into the Americult. That also includes many immigrants. They have been brought into the Americult. And that is not the same thing as hating America or the U.S. Constitution or Americans. Okay, there is the good aspects of this country, of the freedoms that we have come to enjoy here. And then there is the manipulation of that. There is the dark side, and there are the forces of darkness that are attempting to take our freedoms away and push us clearly, as we can see, into a new high-tech form of slavery. And so I've said years ago, where are the good, strong men of this reality, the true tough guys? This was before there was a major rise in UFC. So this is me thinking 20 years ago. UFC was around, but wasn't as popular. Like, where are the people that know martial arts, that know how to fight, that want to expose this system, that want to expose the new world order? And what we have now is we have a lot of people out there that are into UFC and think that they're manly and into Alex Jones and into Joe Rogan that think that they're exposing the system, but they're not exposing the system, and they're not free of the left-right paradigm, and they're not taking accountability for the unjust violence that's been dished out to the Middle East. They haven't become spiritual, and they haven't shown that they understand the law of karma. And Mark Passio puts out a lot of good information, but he himself, even though he has exposed the dominator-destroyer aspect of human psychology that keeps us in slavery, he is associating himself with dominator-destroyer personalities. I've said for years, we should not associate with those that promote murder, or those that listen to those that promote murder, or associated with those that are engaged in murder. How are many people in this society engaged or connected with people that murder? The military-industrial complex and the modern police forces, and maybe in some cases, modern healthcare. But I'll tell you what, not every nurse and doctor is in on a conspiracy to poison everybody with the jab. There's a lot of ways in which nurses and doctors are brainwashed, and they're not a part of a global conspiracy, and they're not a part of a cover-up. They've just been brainwashed by everybody else. What people ought to be concerned with is the brainwashing of people in law enforcement, and they should rise above this blind worship of people in uniform. And so if people are going to rise above, right, a situation in which violence against women is perpetuated, people need to rise above a culture of police worship where there are stories in some cases of police, in some cases, raping women on the hood of their cars. They have to be willing to admit that we live in a current system, we live in a current day and age in which they have made it easy for psychopaths to get into various positions of authority, most especially the position of a police officer, one in which all they need is to not have a criminal history. And that's not difficult for certain white men in certain regions of this country where they're not likely to be targeted by law enforcement, or certain areas in this country to where they're not living in a ghetto that has been polluted by drugs and alcohol. They may live in a certain part of the country to where those negative influences that lead people into criminal behavior are not there, such as extreme poverty. So they may be removed from a situation. That doesn't mean that they're not a criminal at heart. That doesn't mean that they're not a rapist at heart. They have been sitting there, as I said, for years, watching this pornography for years, in some cases, which features many black men and a white woman, and that could be traumatizing to them, and that could be radicalizing them. And they may also want to get back at women because of their own healthy relationships when they came of age. And so this is unfortunately the aspect, the dark psyche of mankind, of many men today. But it's not just something that originated today. It was around before. This type of entrapment here, just join our army, just join our gang, and you can have the spoils of war. This is nothing new. But what they've done is they've been using technology to basically entrap people at a younger and younger age to get them ready for the future that is being created. So wrapping things up now, there should be a larger movement where people are concerned about protecting people in the future. When there is no power grid and there is no food and people have lost their fucking minds. And keep in mind, when that situation happens, there are people out there that are not going to, in many cases, get access to their drugs, be it their pot, which I'm not demonizing, but withdrawal from pot is intense, combined with withdrawing from alcohol, combined with the most seriousness, involuntary withdrawal from various medications. And so we have a heavily drugged up society, especially with cannabis being illegal at the federal level and in certain states in the US, which is atrocious. And so you have many drugged up people in a society that intentionally made them mentally ill. And in some cases, the technology in the society is resulting in some people hearing the voices in their head. So again, when I'm talking about drugged up, I'm not talking about marijuana. I'm talking about pharmaceutical. So antipsychotics, antidepressants, benzoids, other types of medication, SSRIs, Zoloft, you name it. There's all types of stuff out there. And I highly recommend that people stay away from pharmaceuticals as well. That's another conversation. But again, you have a connection here with drugged up people on not only recreational drugs, but pharmaceutical drugs in both pornography and the military. So not just recreational drugs, not just heroin, not just methamphetamines, not just ecstasy, but pharmaceutical drugs and things of that nature. And some of those drugs can cause hypersexuality. Some of the side effects of some of the drugs is hypersexuality or an inclination towards more risky behavior. So there's certain antipsychotics that can cause certain people to be hypersexual and to seek what you would call a risky situation. So some women on medication can end up in risky situations because they're not in full control of themselves. So yeah, someone could take any part of this and go deeper and deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole. But I have done my best to give like an all-encompassing big picture perspective on the situation. I may come back with more on this topic, but a great deal of the problem has been discussed right here and now in this 3-hour podcast.